Chapter 293. The Intermediate Illusion, Camouflage, was one of the many magic scrolls given to Hogg by the Demolic. It could change the user's appearance, body shape, clothing, and weapons. These scrolls have been strengthened by the spellcaster team, so the effect was better and the duration was longer. It could last for 100 minutes, which was close to 2 hours. The Battle Lizardmen used their innate ability to hide and spread, acting as guards. Hogg selected some of the stronger races and gave them the scrolls. He waved the rest of the gnolls away and let them stay behind to provide support. Looking at the dead drakons on the ground, Roland used magic to change the shape of these hunched and ferocious creatures. So many scrolls are enough for you to go around the territories of several colored dragons. Maybe you can even find some inside information. Of course, this is the best possibility. If you encounter a dragon like the green dragon that is sensitive to magic, you have to be careful. This was Renee's warning to him. Although the relationship between the Demolic and the gnolls was not good, both sides were cautious enough in this kind of issue. In addition, Renee also gave Hogg a scroll to master the language, which was copied by the Demolic himself. It recorded part of the commonly used dragon language, which could help the gnolls to complete a better disguise. Hogg did not refuse and directly accepted the scroll. Now, he had finished using it. In a dazzling light, the dead Draken scout appeared again. Hogg clenched his right claw. Thirst for blood was still there, but before using its power, it could not be seen. At the same time, in this short period of time, the gnolls had devoured the corpses on the ground and even licked the blood clean. Hogg took 2 steps forward, thought for a moment, then stopped and turned back. He picked up the scatterberries that had just been thrown away and did not let the gnolls eat them. He carried them in his arms and continued to walk forward, observing the traces of the half-dragon. He went in the opposite direction. Spread out, shut your mouths, don't bare your teeth, and straighten your backs. He took the lead and walked forward. From time to time, he would turn back and scold in a low voice. Draconians aren't like you, idiots. It didn't take long for the gnolls to see the campsite while they were constantly adjusting themselves. Actually, it wasn't quite right to call it campsite. It wasn't the dragon's resting place. It was just a temporary resting place for the scouts. 50 to 60 Draconians were guarding a small hill. Next to their feet were weapons, ropes, and some tools used to lay down camouflage. When Hogg appeared with his men, the sound of their footsteps alerted everyone. Every Draken raised their pitchforks and short spears and aimed them at them. The tense atmosphere almost exposed the jack-o'-lanterns instantly. They could not control their nature, which was very different from the half-dragon people, and all of them bare their fangs. It's us. It was still Hogg who spoke first. Using the draconic language that he had been reciting silently along the way, he waved the 2 handfuls of berries in his hand. Other than this, there is nothing else. As he spoke, he pretended to turn back and glare at his companions. It seemed that he was blaming them for their incompetence, but in fact his eyes were cold. They put down their weapons and went about their own business. There were only whispers in the campsite. As members of the dragon race, the Draconians and the Battle Lizardmen had similar living habits. They were also more silent and did not speak much. But there were exceptions. A Draken came up to them. This guy was deformed. He never had a right eye, and there was only a knotted sarcoma in his left eye. He yelled at Hogg in exasperation. "Do I need to teach you turtles how to crawl? Why are you taking so long to find some fruits?" Hogg lowered his head and did not answer. He still didn't know what his role was, but he could tell from the guy's words. "Eyes, you are too noisy." Another Draken came over. He was tall and powerful, and his body was almost 2 meters long. His muscles were tangled and very oppressive. The characteristics of his dragon form were also more obvious. His skin had become rough and wrinkled dark purple. He wore a leather helmet, and there were 3 thick and short horns on his dragon-like head. His ears and the back of his neck spread outwards. I said in a low voice, "Sorry, leader, these guys," the Draken leader did not wait for him to finish. He grabbed him by the back of his neck and took 2 steps forward. He asked in the dragon language, "Why are you so slow?" Hogg said, "These berries grew too scattered. We only picked them after we scattered." The Draken leader's forehead wrinkled. He instinctively felt that something was wrong, but the magic camouflage was beyond his range of recognition. Even the sweat on the skin, the decoration of the weapons, and the white mucus between the teeth of the Draconians were exactly the same. "Give it to me." Hogg obediently handed over the berries, and then led his people in with their heads lowered. Any hostility would be easily detected. Although the Draconians were not the best in fighting, they were very balanced in all aspects. Their perception was also the same. Hogg stepped into the warning line at the edge of the camp. At this moment, the Draken leader's sharp eyes suddenly turned around. "Wait," he called out to Hogg, who had his back facing him, and then walked straight over. There were a few followers behind him, and each of them was much stronger than the ones he had killed before. "What's your name?" "I forgot." "What's your name?" Hogg did not know, and it was still a question whether the Draconians had names. He did not know if the Draconians were probing him by asking these questions. If you want to gather information, if you can disguise yourself, try not to have any conflicts. Also, don't use that weapon unless you are at your limit. In the dragon's territory, it will bring you more danger. This was what Caesar had told him. Hogg was full of loyalty and trust towards the Black Dragon Emperor, so he kept these words in mind. Sweat dripped down from his leather armor to his neck. The Draken leader glared at Hogg, his gaze becoming sharper and sharper. After a short pause, the other Draconians seemed to have noticed that something was wrong. They all stood up and looked over. Suddenly, a whistle sounded, and it shattered the air that had condensed into a solid substance, attracting everyone's attention. The Draken leader let go of Hogg, who was silent, and said in a low voice, "Alert! Go quickly." The alert was triggered. There was a way in the camp that outsiders did not know about. When the Draconians arrived, they found that the scattered battle lizard men had been forced to reveal their bodies. They were stepping on hunting pincers that made clanking sounds, and the base of the pincers was getting tighter and tighter. "Kill them." The Draconians gasped. Facing more and more battle lizard men that reveal their bodies, the Draconians were ready to fight. "These idiots." Hogg cursed in his heart, then pulled his people and repeated the order of the Draken leader. "Kill them, don't leave any alive." Chapter 294. When Hogg saw the half-dragon leader pouncing forward with incomparable speed, he quickly followed with the weapon disguised as a pitchfork in his hand. More and more battle lizard men appeared from the brown soil. They seemed to be unwilling to give up on their trapped companions and were ready to rescue them. "A bunch of stupid guys," the half-dragon leader said with a smile. There was a natural class difference between the descendants of dragons, and the bloodline of the battle lizard men could not be compared with the half-dragon. Even if there were twice as many of them, these guys would not be able to win. Not to mention, the half-dragon had the advantage in numbers. They leaped and ran like humans, and the leader's arms were surrounded by lightning. Then they waved their pitchforks, and the lightning directly penetrated the formation of the battle lizard men. That was the innate ability of the half-dragon, and some of the stronger ones had the power close to that of dragons. "Kill them." The half-dragon's low breathing sounded one after another. At the moment when the two sides came into contact, Hogg took the hatchet from his people and threw it at the half-dragon without hesitation. The spinning hatchet was like a meteor chasing after the moon. The sound of the hatchet tearing through the air was like the high-pitched scream of a young girl, mixed with the roar of some kind of beast. The powerful sound wave swept across a large number of half-dragons who had their backs to him, and their narrow ears were buzzing. After holding Alex's thirsty blood for a long time, coupled with the mutation of the dragon's bloodline and the radiation, Hogg had many unknown abilities, and this was one of them. However, as a descendant of dragons, the half-dragon's perception was not dull. Their leader could even be linked with sensitivity, so when Hogg waved his arm, the sharp needle-like feeling on his back awakened his instinct. The half-dragon leader jumped sideways and twisted his body in the air, just in time to see the screaming hatchet fly past his eyes and cut off the head of the half-dragon, who was in a straight line with him. The attack did not work, so the half-dragon leader turned around and stared at Hogg, who was looking at him, revealing a mouth full of fine, sharp teeth. "Traitor." It said that until now, it still could not see through the gnoll's disguise. But this did not prevent the half-dragon from fighting back. The howling sound waves of the flying axes caused a lot of noise, which could cause people with weak constitutions to fall into a trance. However, this move was good for dealing with ordinary people, but it seemed that it was still not enough to deal with the draconians. These vicious draconians were all strong, and a little injury would not affect them. The half-dragon leader turned his head, and powerful thunder and electric arcs burst out, ready to kill this group of disobedient dregs. Hog bent his back and lowered his head as he charged forward, clearing a path. His powerful strength allowed him to easily cut open the draconic man's body. As he ran, the gnoll's figure could no longer be concealed. The constant surging power forced him to reveal himself, his blood-stained mane shining brightly. The half-dragon. Once the charge was launched, it could not stop until it reached its goal. 5 or 6 arrows fell on Hog's position a second ago. Hog could not stop now, or he would become a sieve. In fact, for the current Hog, it was very difficult for ordinary arrows to cause too much damage to him. However, the gnoll still instinctively used the experience he gained by sacrificing blood in the duel arena to avoid getting injured as much as possible. After cutting down 4 or 5 draconians in succession, a sinister bolt with thunder shot towards Hog's chest. Hog suddenly twisted his body and changed his direction. However, he was not a monster like Caesar. His muscles were inevitably torn by the violent change of direction. The bolt fell to the ground beside him and exploded. The enemy had predicted his position, but did not expect Hog to have the ability to change direction suddenly. Hog's path was blocked. A short knife with a barb cut opened Hog's back. Because of the radiation, black blood splashed out. This kind of charge was actually easy for leaders like Nero and Husky, but the gnolls were not good at it. More and more demi-dragons gathered around. Their prediction was wrong. The other party did not only have one camp, but 3 triangular footholds. A slight move in one part would affect the whole situation. The entire army of demi-dragons had joined the battle. The situation was not good. I haven't used this thing yet. Hog sneered and kicked the enemy away. He looked back at his people who had been cut up. His right claw that was holding the battle axe loosened slightly, and then he clenched it again. Alex, thirsty blood. The gnoll leader squatted down. The blood vessels in his hands and feet were exposed like earthworms. His pupils also became bright red. A powerful force ran through his body. Hog's nerve reaction was several times faster than before. He grabbed the head of the half-dragon with one hand and crushed it into meat paste. Iradia, the northern imperial court, the Black Dragon Emperor sat on the throne. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the image that his spellcaster team showed him. When the conflict between Hog and the half-dragon broke out, the image began to distort. This was the normal disturbance caused by the power of the carrier on the spying eye. In the image, Hog rushed toward the half-dragon and resisted a thunderbolt. The moving electric arc almost exploded in front of Caesar's eyes. The projection screen disappeared in an instant. Caesar knew that the spying eye was destroyed. It was just an ordinary spell that could not bear energy attacks. However, this could not blind the Black Dragon's vision. After all, it was not just Hog. Almost every member of the clan who went on a mission carried a spying eye. The spellcasters quickly connected with them and obtained the image again. This allowed the Black Dragon to continue observing the battle from a different angle. Hog's encounter and treatment plan were all within the Black Dragon's expectations. Since Caesar let Hog go with thirsty blood, he had no intention of forbidding him from using it. If the gnolls could successfully enter the territory of the chromatic dragons and find out detailed information about 3 or 4 chromatic dragons, that would be the best. However, if the defense was too tight and the mission could not be completed, it did not matter. Before leaving, Caesar gave Hog another option, which was to make as much noise as possible. It was a simple probing operation. Caesar wanted to see to what extent the Evil Dragon Alliance would be able to achieve. Although those fellows had rushed over from all over the world following Tiamat's orders, it was still a problem whether or not they would be able to cooperate in battle. The infighting between evil dragons was no less than that of humans, and all of this originated from the great Queen Tiamat. As for Hogg, Caesar was not particularly worried. He had a clear understanding of the Gnoll leader's ability. As long as he did not encounter an ancient dragon, Hogg, who was carrying a legendary weapon, would have the ability to protect himself to a certain extent. At the same time, Hogg, who had gone crazy after using thirsty blood, had slaughtered all the enemies. He finally calmed down and stared at the blood and bones on the ground, thinking about how to deal with the aftermath. Suddenly, a low roar exploded above the hills. A crimson dragon rose into the sky from behind the hills. There seemed to be flames burning on its back, and the shadow cast by its huge body covered the basin. A low-level competition. It landed, and a howling wind blew the remaining gnolls off their feet. Looking down at the magic item in the Gnoll leader's hand, the Gnoll leader snorted and said, "Nice weapon, but it's a pity that it followed the wrong master." Chapter 295. After a fierce battle, there were not many gnolls left. Other than Hogg, there were only 40 or so of the 200 people he brought with him. Now, they still had to face a dragon descending from the sky. Hogg's face was gloomy. He looked up at the ferocious mask of the crimson dragon. The red dragon also bent its neck slightly and lowered its head to look at him. For no reason, the huge dragon suddenly grinned. It was the kind of bloodthirsty smile that one would have when they found a new prey. Hellfire, Kazito Teteric, was a true dragon from the same era as Aksui. Its appearance was just like its name. The burning halo was so powerful that it almost materialized. This guy was surrounded by rising flames. Compared to Queen Aksui, Kazito was smarter. He knew how to protect himself from being attacked. He was also ambitious. Even though he was already a legendary ancient dragon, he still wanted to become stronger and try to rule Iradia. The roaring draconic aura surged and exploded. This was the great power that belonged to the legendary ancient red dragon. Kazito's senses were stronger and its speed was faster, so it arrived at the battlefield first after receiving the news. Behind it, the smaller and younger adult dragon Azalito arrived late. It appeared in the area behind Hogg and blocked their escape route. The Blackwing royal court only found out that there were 2 red dragons among the evil dragons. They did not expect that they had been together for a long time and now appeared in front of Hogg at the same time. Interesting. You are a relative of the Black Dragon, Caesar? He actually gave such a weapon to his subordinates to use. He is really a freak. Kazito's focus was obviously not on the losses on his side. As a powerful red dragon, Kazito, who came from the south, did not know much about Caesar. Besides, although the Blackwing King was a little famous now, it was far from the point where the world knew about him. Many details had not been leaked. A descendant of a true dragon being able to use a legendary weapon was something new no matter where it was. This was also the reason why Kazdu was amazed. It clicked its tongue and exclaimed in admiration. Then it let out a chuckle, and its eyes under the mask revealed a greedy gleam. Such a weapon was qualified to be in the collection of a legendary true dragon. However, Kazito was still a legendary dragon that had lived for thousands of years. The red dragon's hot-tempered nature had changed a lot in Kazito. The enormous ancient red dragon with a long beard did not immediately make a move. Instead, it observed the Gnoll leader first. It guessed that the little guy in front of it should be the leader of the king of the Blackwing Scouts. From a Gnoll, Kazito could draw a rough outline of the Gnoll's overall strength. All right, Jack Allen. After observing for a while, the red dragon made a judgment in its heart. It let out a long roar, and its nostrils were full of sulfuric breath. Its words were full of an inviolable tone. I am very interested in your talent. So, give me your weapon and become my servant. You will win a chance to live. Kazito's words were not unreasonably arrogant and baseless nonsense. There was nothing wrong with the current situation. According to Iradia's previous experience, the Gnolls were a race that knew how to judge the situation. They were born to worship the powerful true dragon, and they were proud to be the descendant of an evil dragon. Among them, the red dragon was the most proud. Kazito had suffered this kind of treatment countless times when he was young, so he did not show any emotion. It seemed that it was only natural. Hogg could not help but frown. His luck was really good. He had encountered 2 red dragons as soon as he set out. If it was only the adult red dragon, he could rely on the help of his legendary weapon and his descendant to fight it. Against the ancient red dragon, there was no other way but to run for his life. Khazito should be one of the strongest gnolls that came to crusade against Caesar. Even if they were to face the king of the Black Wing, it would be the real main force. Facing such an existence, even if Hogg tried his best to break free, it would be very difficult to escape unscathed. What if I refuse? Hogg asked. At the same time, he looked around. It seemed that there were only 2 red dragons nearby. There were no other color dragons. Khazito tilted his head in surprise. He knew very well that the king of the Black Wing was a dragon with a different body, but Iradio was also a gnoll born and raised here. This was somewhat strange. Looking at Hogg, the red dragon said coldly, "Then you'll be buried with your weak kin and burned to ashes in the flames." A suffocating silence filled the air. The gnolls around were torn apart by Khazito's violent dragon aura. They were trembling in fear and were incomparably cowardly. If it were not for Hogg's words, they would have immediately changed sides and joined the legendary red dragon. "I serve Caesar. He is the king of the north." Hogg put away his protruding fangs and said sincerely, "It will be very difficult to defeat him." Whether it was the color dragons or the metal dragons, all dragons were prideful and arrogant. The red dragon was one of the best among them. Their self-esteem was even stronger than the gold dragons. They were passionate about fighting for fame and fortune. Even if it was only in terms of words, they would have to be superior to others. Therefore, it was not difficult to get information from the red dragon. All they had to do was try to intensify their prideful nature. "Ignorant fools," Khazito cursed, as if he despised the gnoll's crude knowledge. He sneered and said, "That dragon with a different body that challenged the evil dragon mother is courageous, but its strength is not enough to support it to make such a decision. It wants to defy the will of the color dragons. It overestimates itself. To be honest, I actually quite admire this fellow. If it was not for the fact that it had completely fallen out with the dragon mother, I wouldn't mind teaching it carefully and guiding it on the right path. I would let it obtain glory and become my subordinate." After completely controlling the situation, Khazito began to talk nonsense and brag to itself. The red dragon's nature was not so easy to completely get rid of. In the process, it noticed that the young red dragon Azalito suddenly showed a timid expression. Then, a shadow flashed across the dome. The speed of the black dragon's arrival had already broken the boundary of sound. Almost after he landed, the rumbling of thunder and the explosion of the air that tore through the air arrived. Caesar landed with a whoosh and appeared directly in front of Khazito. He happened to block it from seeing the legendary weapon in the gnoll's hands. He asked in dragon language, "So, Red Dragon, how do you plan to make me your subordinate?" The dark metal scales that reflected brilliant light, the majestic and ferocious claws and huge wings, and the majestic and fierce gaze. Caesar looked down at the legendary ancient red dragon in front of him coldly. Because he was standing on 2 feet from the visual effect, he looked bigger and stronger than the red dragon. Chapter 296. The adult red dragon Azilidur was first dazzled by the dazzling black and gold light, and then it was overwhelmed with uncontrollable fear. It had crossed the continent from the far south to the north only because it was compelled by the oracle of the evil dragon mother and wanted to get some benefits at the same time. It had never thought that it would face the black-winged king head-on. The reason why it had bowed to another red dragon was just to give itself a sense of security. It did not expect that the black dragon emperor, Caesar Tangerine, would appear right in front of it. Azalidur only wanted to retreat and stand with the other red dragon. On the other hand, in Kadozi's heart, some of its beliefs were cruelly torn apart. Even though it had seen Caesar's appearance through the projection of the oracle, it had always subconsciously thought that the red dragon was the highest true dragon among the Pinochet dragons. This sense of superiority was slowly accumulated from millions of years of experience in suppressing the other Pinochet dragons. The blue dragon was ignorant, the green dragon was cowardly and hypocritical, the black dragon was narrow-minded and childish, and the white dragon was useless. The existence of the four Penishade dragons was just to show off the nobility and power of the red dragon, and the metal dragons were even more vulnerable. Until it saw a more powerful and ferocious individual. Kadozi subconsciously ignored the black dragon's ridicule and forced itself to calm down. Caesar Tangerine, how dare you appear in this place alone? Do you really think that Her Majesty Tiamat can't come here? Why don't you continue? Caesar twisted his neck and looked at the red dragon in front of him. You brag in front of my kin and indirectly raise yourself by belittling others. Such a ridiculous method. Let me guess. Have I accidentally pierced your fragile heart called pride and self-esteem? Red Dragon, I've seen enough people like you before I came to Iradia. Due to his own experience, Caesar had never liked the Red Dragon. But now, he did not mind saying more. You're ridiculous. Of course, Kadozi would not admit that Caesar had guessed his thoughts. As soon as his voice trailed off, he seemed to wake up from a dream and roared. He raised his dragon claws and swiped at the black dragon. The flames between his teeth also surged out with an unstoppable momentum. Just as the legendary red dragon moved, Caesar activated the dimensional suppression. After devouring the true blood of Tiamat, his draconic aura had undergone an extraordinary transformation. Kadozi was fortunate enough to experience the feeling of an ordinary person when facing it, and invisible spiritual impact like a torrent. Of course, this alone was not enough to crush a legendary red dragon. So Caesar spat out a breath of ice to counteract the red dragon's flames. He decided to beat Kadozi up first. The evil dragons had always been the way to do things. It was difficult to sit down and talk without a fight. The legendary ancient red dragon, Kadozi Teteric, was more than 920 years old. No matter where he went in Iradia, he was a powerful being that could not be ignored. However, he was now full of nervousness and enthusiasm. His opponent was the newly born black dragon, the king of black wings, Caesar Tangerine. Currently, Iradia was the most powerful black dragon. Almost at the next moment, Kadozi had already thought of retreating. His opponent's strength and speed were too powerful. It was the first time he had seen such a powerful being. He was even more powerful than the previous red dragon. Originally, it was reasonable to say that after reaching the legendary realm, physical strength would have little impact on the battle. At this stage, the true dragons mostly used powerful breaths and varied spells to fight and kill. However, this black dragon was different. Its strength was even beyond common sense. It broke the barrier of the perception of true dragons that mortals had of true dragons. With its powerful strength, it suppressed the legendary red dragon and pursued it relentlessly. Although the true dragons were famous for their physical strength, there were many creatures in the endless astral world that were stronger than the true dragons. For example, there were demon lords, astral whales, titans, and so on. The true dragons were powerful because they were the perfect combination of strength and magic, especially after they reached the peak of the legendary realm. However, Kaiser was obviously a case of someone who had grown up crooked. The problem was that this crooked guy was so powerful. If it weren't for Tiamat's prophecy, Kadozi would have suspected that this was a titan wearing the skin of a true dragon. Anyway, Kaiser's appearance was very different from ordinary true dragons. Two gigantic dragons roared as they soared into the sky. After a delay of nearly 10 minutes, along with a deep growl, the two gigantic figures that were entangled with each other began to plummet straight and swiftly. Soon, the two figures separated. The red dragon's magic was torn apart, and it lost its balance and ability to fly. It fell heavily on the hilly ground, forming a deep pit with smoke and dust everywhere. Other than being slightly larger in size, the legendary red dragon Kadozi was no match for the black dragon in terms of tonnage, strength, defense, and magic resistance. If Caesar did not have other plans and deliberately let the battle go on, Kadozi's body would have been torn apart and twisted in the end. Caesar swooped down and followed, stirring up a tornado of dust on the hilly ground. The black dragon swept across the ground at high speed and forced the fallen red dragon to stand up again. Kadozi was now fully aware that he was no match for the black dragon, even with the help of Azalidur. Moreover, that damned idiot still did not dare to move. In order to deal with the king of the Black Wings, Kadozi had to wait for Tiamat, or at least wait for the help of other legendary ancient dragons. The black dragon roared and forced the heavily injured ancient red dragon to stand up again. The dragon's body seemed to have shrunk by half in an instant, and its previous majestic aura was now gone. It looked at the black dragon Caesar Tangerine who had landed in front of it. It knew that Caesar was not a typical Pinochet dragon, and he would not show any mercy even when dealing with his own kind. Your strength is not bad. Although a little silly, you are strong enough, and your skin is rough, and your flesh is thick. Caesar stared at it and commented as if he was looking at a collector's item. What do you want? Kadozi raised its head. Although it had suffered a great defeat, the red dragon's dignity did not allow it to show any weakness. Until now, it still retained its most basic pride. Caesar said, "If I wanted to kill you, I would not have given you the chance to speak again." In fact, due to his personal experience, Caesar had a deep grudge against the red dragon. In the early years, he could not wait to find 2 red dragons and kill them to prove his strength. However, his mentality was much better now, and he did not need to prove himself in this way anymore. Staring at the legendary ancient dragon, Caesar smiled and said, "Red Dragon, you have to know that this is not a personal grudge at all. It is a fight between a bad-tempered guy. I am the target, and you are all just pawns." Chapter 297. Kadozi shrunk its neck. It was true that the red dragon was naturally arrogant, but it was not an idiot who could not distinguish between facts. It knew very well that what Caesar said was an irrefutable fact. But even so, the red dragon did not feel that there was anything wrong with it. This was a simple exchange of benefits. It was not a loss for it to serve Tiamat in exchange for the awakening of its ancestral bloodline. But it was not worth it to bet its life on it. So Kadozi could only nod and agree. You're right. The art of conversation had never been popular among the Pinochet dragons. The evil dragons liked to be straightforward, and Caesar was the same. He knew that Kadozi had its own plans, but he did not care about the thoughts of a loser. Waving his hand at the adult red dragon who was not far away and ready to escape, Caesar stared at the ancient red dragon that was even bigger than himself and said directly, "Now, you are my captives. Do you choose to obediently follow me back to the north, or do you want me to knock you unconscious and take you away? Or do you want me to drag these 2 corpses back?" At the moment of life and death, the so-called pride and persistence of the red dragon were all hidden in a hole of shame. Kadozi looked at his own injuries and replied while panting heavily, "We will follow you back." To be honest, it was not an easy task to imprison a legendary-level ancient dragon. As long as Caesar was not watching closely, Kadozi had 10,000 ways to escape from his control. A temporary grievance was nothing. As long as he did not say anything about it afterward, the ancient red dragon thought to itself. What it did not know was that Caesar did not intend to truly imprison Kadozi and control him completely. He only needed to control them for a short period of time. In order to deal with the mother of evil dragons, Tiamat, Caesar needed to prepare some arrangements, and Kadozi would be the bait. Caesar took them away and threw them into the expanded dungeon of the king's court. He did not care about the 2 red dragons anymore and left. No matter how courageous these 2 fellows were, they wouldn't be able to run away immediately. This was a normal instinct of intelligent creatures. They would wait for a few days and see how things went. The black dragon took this opportunity to gather his army and launched the first attack on the enemies outside the borders of the northern lands. The Blackwing army did not move quickly, so Caesar was 1 step ahead of them, arriving at an empty buffer zone to rest and wait. He did not expect that after wandering around for a while, he would see his opponent, a giant dragon floating in the air above the hills, emanating the light of divine power. Tiamat's cold face could be seen clearly from afar. She had descended on the body of a green dragon apostle, and the other 4 heads were created by divine power. She had purposely come to search for Caesar, and her eyes flashed with a ferocious light that the black dragon had never seen before. The mother of evil dragons had changed her usual style. After meeting the black dragon, she did not waste any time, nor did she utter a single word. She did not even let out a dragon roar as she attacked. Divine spell, shadow of hell. Tiamat's body emitted a gray shockwave of divine power, spreading rapidly like a curtain of smoke. It filled Caesar's vision, making it difficult for him to distinguish. The black dragon lord bared his teeth and entered battle mode. Legend had it that Tiamat's divine kingdom was in the depths of Bator. The mother of evil dragons had a rather close relationship with the devils, so it was not surprising that Tiamat had created some divine spells that were extremely unique to hell. The dark divine light collided directly with Caesar's armored scales, causing it to deviate. The gray shockwave bounced off the black dragon's body, sweeping diagonally across the rolling hills. A patch of tall shrubs with various poses and brandishing claws was blown to pieces. His vision recovered, but when Caesar's whistling breath swept past, Tiamat's avatar had long since disappeared. She had used the anywhere door to disappear. Without waiting for Caesar to turn around and maintain his vigilance, the mother of evil dragons appeared once again, raising her head and looking disdainfully. 5 different colored light waves struck the black dragon and Caesar. This was not a divine kingdom, and Tiamat had not personally descended, so she could not use distorting and changing the laws to easily crush the black dragon. She could only use this extremely low-level method to fight. In fact, for this, Tiamat was already beyond angry. The mother of evil dragons knew that Caesar's body had the magic resistance that only legendary dragon species had, but the divine spell, Prismatic Rebuke, had 5 types of damage, and although it was effective against enemies that were immune to various types of energy, there would always be one type that could cause the greatest damage. However, against the Black Dragon Lord who could only rely on his body to resist, the 5-color prismatic light did not have any real effect. Whether it was the red flames, the blue dark lightning, the green toxic smoke, the black painful corrosion, or the white frost domain, they were all ineffective. This fellow has almost the same resistance as a divine body, Tiamat thought. This could explain many things, and with every layer of thought, her eyes became colder and colder. The flames behind Caesar burned brighter, and he sped up, trying to get closer to the mother of evil dragons. "Good afternoon, Your Majesty Tiamat. I thought you would use a red dragon as an apostle projection to appear in front of me. Who would have thought that your host would actually be a green dragon? Even if it is an ancient green dragon, how much power can that unbearably frail body of yours carry?" Tiamat swung her tail, and a crescent-shaped wave of air swept out from her tail, majestically flying past. She seemed to be in an extremely bad mood today, and she loathed the mutated black dragon deeply. She did not have the slightest intention of conversing with Caesar. The tail sweep was extremely fast. If it was Tiamat's true body that used it, this attack might be able to blast through a small planet, but in the apostle state, it gave Caesar room to dodge. In the end, the black dragon narrowly avoided this tail sweep, and a cut was opened on his shoulder blade, cracks appearing on his scales. After ascending to the level of true God, the things that the black dragon was proud of were nothing in Tiamat's eyes. The green dragon apostle, strengthened by her divine power, had the power to contend against and even suppress Caesar, and was not afraid of close combat. The situation seemed to have returned to the scene when the black dragon fought the red dragon, but the green dragon apostle, regardless of whether it was strength, speed, or dexterity, was superior to the red dragon Kadozi, only its defensive ability was a bit weaker. Meanwhile, in between, Tiamat could still use divine spells and 5-color dragon breath to attack, and every time she felt that her strength was insufficient, she would use her breath to blast Caesar's head and face until he was covered in dirt, and then she would once again open up the distance between them. This was the 7th time Caesar forcefully resisted the divine spell, and the gray-white radiance smashed into his scales with tinkling sounds. Tiamat clenched her claws, and the thick and viscous gray fog gushed out into a cloud, completely submerging the black dragon, greatly obstructing his vision, hearing, and senses. The evil dragon mother had truly begun to exert her power. The gray fog mixed with Caesar's black body into a cloud, and Tiamat first used a supermodel ability, extreme divine power, to push the damage of the next divine spell to the limit, and then used her divine power as the evil dragon mother to strengthen her own spell-like abilities, doubling the power once again. Caesar, who felt uneasy, quickly retreated, but it was already too late. Tiamat's breath had been prepared for a long time, and now with a loud bang, the five-colored breath converged into a rainbow beam, whistling through the air. This was the most powerful attack of the Dragon Queen, and also the signature attack of the evil Dragon Mother. Just with its own power, it could crush creatures within a radius of a few miles into ashes, not to mention now that it was enhanced by two divine powers. Even from far away, one could feel the terrifying energy produced after the breath was compressed to the limit, and this was not an attack that Caesar could withstand with just his body alone. Light flashed, and violent shockwaves and auroras enveloped the strange black dragon body. Tiamat flapped her wings and retreated a little, and her breath did not stop coming out her mouth. She was in a good mood, and she stared at the black dragon without blinking. The gray fog had long been torn into microscopic elements by the blast, and there was nothing around Caesar, so there was nowhere to hide. Chapter 298. The black dragon's scarlet vertical eye with a slit blinked, staring at the five-colored dragon breath that was roaring towards him, and took a deep breath. The power of the fission furnace was instantly pushed to the limit. He spread his wings slightly, and the crimson crack on his chest spread out. After that, Caesar opened his mouth and breathed out at the same moment. The rainbow divine energy of the Dragon Queen arrived before him. If the entire process was played 100 times slower, it could be seen that the first thing that came out of Caesar's mouth was a pile of particles that emitted white light. These particles wandered around his mouth, and finally, with the flow of his breath, they gathered and exploded. In Tiamat's sight, the huge body of the black dragon blurred for a moment, and then disappeared, leaving only a dazzling beam of light. Breath against breath, the evil dragon mother narrowed her eyes, and for some reason, she subconsciously cast a divine barrier around herself. Almost at the same time, the two breaths collided with a loud bang, and the point of contact between the two sides instantly absorbed all the light around them, plunging the afternoon buffer zone into a brief darkness. Then, it burst out with an unparalleled, powerful light, and just the aftermath alone could completely flatten everything within a radius of several miles. Even from far away, one could feel the terrifying energy of the breath that was compressed to the extreme. White light flashed, and violent shockwaves and tongues of flame devoured Caesar and Tiamat. In a loud bang, the barrier raised by divine power and magic was instantly dispersed by the hurricane. Tiamat was still breathing, and Caesar's fission furnace did not show any signs of drying up for a while. The original point of contact between the rainbow and the fission breath continued to explode, gradually forming an indescribable deep black ring, and around it, unstable, distorted cracks appeared in the space. Both Caesar and Tiamat realized that things were not going well. But at this moment, neither of them could withdraw, and the one who stopped breathing first would suffer a heavy blow from the other, and this was something they could not accept. So at this time, not only did the black dragon and Tiamat's green dragon apostle not stop, but instead increased their output with all their might, trying to suppress each other and push the ring of instability to the other side in order to cause more damage. Under the continuous and violent energy output, the rotating ring of instability gradually expanded, and then it exploded again. Although the explosion this time was silent and without any movement, it was actually filled with killing intent, and its destructive power was much more terrifying than the explosion caused by the first breath collision. The strong spatial torsion swept across the surroundings, and small spiral explosions appeared on Caesar and Tiamat's bodies one after another. After a series of explosions, the two giant dragons both fell to the ground, creating two large craters. The divine power that pervaded Tiamat's body was dispelled, and the shadows projected by the four heads also disappeared. All that could be seen was a dark green female, ancient green dragon collapsed on the ground. All four limbs shattered into ashes, and blood carrying divine power gushed out. On the other hand, Caesar was not in a good state either. The half of his body that was near the explosion completely exploded, entering a strange state of melting, continuously dripping down like boiling wax, and only after being cooled by the icy breath did this state completely disappear. So tough, the power of the rainbow breath stacked 5 times, even mixed with the blessing of my divine authority and bloodline strengthening, actually did not destroy you. You can actually resist this level of power. Tiamat finally spoke, and as she spoke, divine power flickered on the green dragon apostle's body, and the broken limbs quickly healed, the scales that had been scorched black regaining their luster. The evil dragon matriarch rose into the air again, raising her head, and the shadows of the other 4 heads appeared once more, her appearance once more returning to how it was before the battle began. This level of battle was rather difficult for legends, and the consumption was also extraordinary, but it was nothing to the evil dragon matriarch. This bit of consumption was nothing to her, and after this, the evil dragon matriarch still had an endless stream of divine power to use. Cough! Caesar gasped for breath, using his tail to support his body and stand firm. He was unable to instantly restore his dragon body like the Dragon Queen, but the injuries on his body were also healing at a speed that mortals could not fathom. After all, this body had been continuously and deeply strengthened, and at the same time, it had also absorbed the divine fragment of the god of the hunt and Tiamat's true blood. It was a mature and powerful body, and its abilities were not to be underestimated, comparable to the evil creatures of the prime material plane. Pausing, he said, "Choosing an apostle and directly sending a projection into the prime material plane is the fastest and best way for true gods to influence the prime material plane, but choosing a good vessel is not easy. How long can your green dragon apostle last in a battle of this level? Half an hour? An hour? Don't you want to consider throwing in some divine fragment to carry your power?" Tiamat's eyes narrowed. Caesar's words made her think of the true blood that she had been cheated of. That was the true blood of the dragon god, containing the same potential as her own. Even the evil dragon matriarch, who had seen thousands of things, would feel heartache at this. "You do not have the right to do so, Worm." Tiamat was a little angry, but her voice was cold and without a trace of emotion. Caesar, whose body was rapidly healing and regenerating his left front and back limbs, had a mocking look in his eyes. "Your Majesty, do you think I do not know your plan? Using an apostle to stop me, and then sending other colored dragons to attack the north. As long as you destroy my army, uproot my foundation, and then turn back to deal with me afterwards, it seems to be much easier, no?" Tiamat did not say anything. Just as Caesar exposed the evil dragon matriarch's plan, dozens of colored dragons had already ordered their slaves to attack the Blackwing army. The colored dragons were just like their ancestor, Tiamat, arrogant and proud. They could not wait to enter the battlefield the moment the two sides came into contact, showing off their power and attitude in a high-profile manner. They were proud of killing and power, and began a killing competition with each other. Under normal circumstances, the Blackwing army would not be able to resist dozens of colored dragons who were at least adult dragons. Of course, it was the same now. However, this did not mean that Caesar would lose without a doubt, because he had allies and reinforcements. "We have stepped over the cliff of thorns, followed order and justice, faced evil without cowardice, stained with blood without hesitation, because we have followed the path that the good Dragon King has shown us. Whether it is the sea or the chasm, whether it is volcanoes or glaciers, they are all covered in the tracks of our wings. We will eventually lead you back to the right path, Tiamat had a spiritual connection with the Penishade dragon believers that she had recruited. So even if she was here, she could see everything that was happening on the battlefield with her own eyes. Lowly blood descendant of Bahamut. Tiamat screamed, her eyes burning with rage. She then let out a hoarse roar. How dare you do this? As one of the Penishade dragons, you actually walked together with that damned fellow Bahamut, unfilial son. This is true blasphemy. This is a denial of your own bloodline. Chapter 299. Tiamat said with a hateful tone, You plan to use those filthy bastards of Bahamut to deal with your own kind? Looks like it now. Caesar answered this question without any sense of shame as a dragon. His expression was extremely ugly in Tiamat's eyes, twisted like a maggot. This guy actually laughed and said, Don't make it sound like you care about the Penishade dragons. Besides, I'm just imitating and learning from my ancestors. You've done many similar things before, and now you don't seem to mind at all. Tiamat raised her 5 heads, but did not attack again. The Dragon Queen's gaze was exceptionally terrifying. Layers of divine might and dragon might overlapped, enough to make any mortal below the level of a true god tremble uncontrollably. However, it had little effect on the black dragon. As early as when the energy crystal heart was formed, Caesar's body had already begun to develop a certain resistance to the suppression of aura and will. Now, with the accumulation of psionic energy over the years, his resistance was extremely high. Even if Tiamat's true body descended, she might not be able to do anything to him with just her aura. Very good. In the end, the evil dragon mother coldly nodded. As soon as her voice fell, the green dragon apostle confronting the black dragon lord suddenly had his strength sucked dry. His divine power turned into rune threads, disappearing in an unstoppable manner. The evil dragon mother immediately left. Compared to Caesar, she was more concerned about the battlefield and hated the metal dragons who worshipped Bahamut even more. The moment the ancient green dragon's eyes recovered, it immediately used a teleportation spell to escape. It had personally witnessed the confrontation between the Dragon Queen and the Black Dragon. It knew that it was no match for this mutated dragon, so it immediately fled as soon as it regained control of its body. It did not even leave behind a proper sentence, losing all face as an ancient green dragon. Caesar did not use the spotless land to stop it. He coldly stared at the void until the dust in this area settled. Only then did he let out a light sigh and began to examine his injuries. Fighting the Dragon Queen head-on sounded tough and valiant, but it was actually not easy. Caesar extinguished the flames behind his wings and returned to the ground. Only then did he realize that his entire body was aching faintly. The black dragon turned its head and looked left and right, but there was no one around. Caesar's multifunctional tail claws began to work. Without trembling, he plucked out the damaged scales bit by bit, revealing large chunks of firm, dark red flesh. This was not an injury left behind by a breath attack, but a scratch from an earlier close combat. None of the wounds were very deep, nor were they serious. Caesar had not paid attention to them at the time, but now he felt that his strength was constantly draining away. A sense of tiredness assaulted him like a tide, and his mind was drowsy. Power drain, aging curse. This isn't the power of the Tiamat, divine domain, Caesar thought with gritted teeth. It seems like the Dragon Emperor's stomach also swallowed a divine artifact, and its effects were also transmitted through the apostles. Perhaps not even Tiamat herself noticed, but if this battle continued for a bit longer, Caesar would enter a truly dangerous state. Caesar laid on the ground, using psionic energy and the automatic control unit to treat his wounds. Streaks of purple mist could be seen drifting out from the black dragon's body. Those were the threads of power drain that were planted into the black dragon's body. On the other hand, his fission furnace was also continuously operating, continuously removing the curse from a deeper level. There was no need to worry about the main battlefield. Ever since the metal dragon race appeared, Caesar and his Black Wing army were no longer the main characters of this battle. He had long secretly instructed the clan leaders to gradually withdraw their own clansmen when the reinforcements arrived and they entered a chaotic battle, handing the stage over to the metal dragons and rainbow dragons. After spending quite a bit of time to remove the hidden injuries on his body, Caesar arrived at the edge of the main battlefield and looked into the distance. Even from far away, the roaring roars and energy waves already assaulted his face, toppling mountains and overturning seas. In the sky outside the Tahala Desert, a clear, dividing line appeared. On the other side of the sky, the light golden radiance and the bright scarlet red were clearly separated. This was the concentrated embodiment of the Bahamut believers and Tiamat believers, resulting in the illusory projections of the Northwind stronghold and the Demon Scale fortress. Surrounding them were the metal dragons of the good faction and the rainbow dragons of the evil faction. Reinforcements. This was the plan that Caesar and Silver Dragon Enegorn had conspired together, obtaining the approval of the Platinum Dragon God. For this, the metal dragons had made deep preparations. They had carefully assessed the military forces that Tiamat would dispatch to the Northlands, and then gathered the clansmen that were a level higher in numbers and strength, preparing to deal a heavy blow to the powerful evil dragons of this continent. Close to 100 dragons and their thousands of dragon bloodline vassals, descendants, and kin filled the ground and the sky, fighting to the death in this small, crowded space. This was a rare dragon war that Iradia had seen in thousands of years. The scale was so large that it was difficult to find any records that could compare to it. Perhaps only Tiamat and Bahamut had led their clansmen to descend on Iradia, had such a magnificent scene, but now it was completely ignited because of Caesar. Beautiful spells streaked across the sky, and all kinds of dragon breaths filled the sky. The servants that had died tragically wailed and bled, and the dragons that had fallen to the ground roared and struggled. Even the important and colossal immemorial dragons were filled with danger. Even Caesar could not guarantee his safety if he stayed here. This kind of battle was too high energy. The dragon's head was smashed into a dog's head. As long as he could walk out alive, he would be qualified to be called the victor. Farewell. After watching for a while, Caesar slipped away without looking back. He did not care about the reason why the two sides were fighting to the death, nor did he consider the possibility that Bahamut would settle accounts with him later. Of course, the two dragon gods were not idiots. Caesar's selfish scheme would definitely not escape their eyes. As long as the Black Dragon and his army retreated from the battlefield, Bahamut and Tiamat would immediately realize that something was wrong and that they had been schemed against. But it did not matter. The metal dragons and the color dragons were born to be mortal enemies. This was the nature that the two dragon gods had set for them. Once the two sides came into contact, the situation would develop uncontrollably. Unless Bahamut and Tiamat could restrain their own people and shake hands and make peace, it would be possible to stop this war before the victor was decided. But the grievances between the two dragon gods had accumulated over millions of years, and their hatred for each other was beyond imagination. They could not wait for the other to die immediately. Even if the nine-faced dragon god Io appeared, he would probably not be able to make these two enemies shake hands and make peace. This was the situation that Caesar had intentionally facilitated, and also the situation that he wanted to see the most. A war between dragons of this magnitude could not be decided in a short period of time. It would take at least several years, or even decades. And if they fought a long war, no matter who was the victor, the good dragons and the evil dragons would definitely be greatly weakened. This would greatly weaken Tiamat and Bahamut's control over this region. And this was precisely Caesar's goal. After this battle, the two dragon gods' control over Iradia would be greatly reduced. He could have a period of stable development, accumulate power in Iradia, complete the construction of the base and self-evolution, and prepare to face the true gods in the future. Chapter 300. Be it the turbulent undercurrents and the treacherous situation in the Northlands, or the unknown thoughts of the two dragon gods after they realized that they had fallen into the trap, none of it affected Caesar, who had been longing to return to his lair. In this period, The Black Dragon had designed the entire course of the war. First, he contacted the metallic dragons to request for assistance, and after receiving a response, he began to extend his tentacles outwards. Once the metallic dragons were basically in place, he sent Hogg to scout for information and immediately followed to capture the ancient red dragon, baiting the rainbow dragons into attacking in advance. After that, he would face the Dragon Queen's apostle head-on, setting up an ambush on the battlefield. The entire process was filled with dark calculations, and every step was a little dangerous. It was completely different from the heroic war epics sung by bards. Now that everything was going smoothly, Caesar's constantly tense nerves could finally relax. In this process of conspiracy and bloodshed, his wisdom had once again grown rapidly. Speaking of which, it had been a long time since he had tried his best to find a way out. That was when the little black dragon had faced the human Roy. Although the danger this time was just as great, the Black Dragon Lord appeared to be at ease this time. The entire process was more daunting than dangerous. When the curtains of this war were drawn and the dust settled, if Caesar could walk out of the vortex of the battle between the two dragon gods alive, the significance of the Black Dragon's existence would immediately be elevated when the news spread. After all, no matter which prime material plane it was, those who could compete with the gods were all local bigwigs. With the reputation of the Platinum Dragon God and the Evil Dragon Mother, the name of Caesar Tangerine would carry a lot of weight in all of Iradia. The Black Dragon Emperor would be mentioned in the same breath as Emperor Enrique of the empire on which the sun never sets, and Chancellor de Chambre of the Trade Federation, perhaps even surpassing them in terms of reputation. Caesar's black wings streaked across the sky as he returned to his own territory. He received a lot of looks of awe and hatred. Some of the humans knelt down to show their respect, while others cursed in their hearts. The children were all carried into the house by the adults. They curiously leaned against the window and looked at the black dragon's shining scales and steel-like wings. Their mouths were wide open in surprise. A fearless noble boy took the risk to push open the window, but before he could raise his head and marvel, he was once again pulled back into the house by his parents. The window was slammed shut, and a curtain was drawn over it. Faint sounds of reprimanding and praying could be heard from inside. Caesar changed his posture and adjusted the amount of flames he spewed out. He descended in a slanted and straight line. He glided close to the Rhine kingdom, and the air currents rumbled above the city. Finally, he returned to the Lord's Hall of the royal court. The leaders of the Blackwing clan were already waiting for him. The Knoll Hog and the Orc Gaul bowed their heads and saluted. This was the courtesy that Caesar had specially exempted them from. The other clan leaders all bent their knees to show their respect and loyalty to the Black Dragon Emperor. Tighten the power of the Blackwing clan. This was the first order that Caesar gave after his return. This level of war between the dragons was not something that he and his forces could participate in. If the two dragon gods felt that they were being used and fooled, Bahamut and Tiamat did not even need to stop fighting. They only needed to tacitly and intentionally shift the battlefield to the north. This would be enough to destroy Caesar's newly born hybrid empire. Even if there were two more Northlands, they would not be enough to fight against these dragons. This was very easy, so there was a high probability, or even a certainty, that it would happen. Gods were not so easy to offend. Once they became enemies, they would have to bear the wrath of the gods. It was easy for Caesar to protect his own life, but it was very difficult for him to protect his foundation. Therefore, he had to make a choice and cut off some things. Give up the khaki territory and push the empire's border back. Also, withdraw the core power of the Blackwing clan, as well as the Black Shirts who have proven their loyalty, ability, and wisdom from the Northlands, and go to the green fields. We will follow your orders. The clan leaders nodded. This was the most urgent plan that needed to be carried out at this stage. There was no doubt about it. I have to admit that this is a very good plan, Your Majesty. However, the Demolic Leon interrupted. But it is worth mentioning that withdrawing from this war will definitely cause us to become enemies with the Metal Dragons. This is something that everyone knows. I know. Caesar turned his head. So what? Just say it. Please allow me to say more, Your Majesty. Leon said, currently, the spellcaster team has made progress in the research of dragons with the help of the silver dragon einkorn. Just 2 days ago, we have successfully stripped the black dragon Garen and black Shia of the Dragon Queen's will. If we become enemies with the metal dragons now, it might cause the silver dragons to cancel their support of our knowledge, research plans, and magical power and leave the Northlands. Back then, Caesar and the metal dragons had formed an alliance and made a few requests. Other than helping the Black Dragon Emperor to clear his name in Iradia, the most important thing was that they needed spellcasters with powerful intelligence to provide assistance to the Northlands and help Caesar's research team to climb the magical tree of technology. After that, the silver dragon Einkorn, who had met the black dragon and negotiated with Caesar, visited again and stayed in the Northlands for a long time. The platinum dragon god decided to agree to the black dragon's request and let Einkorn provide assistance to the Northlands in this area. At the same time, he was responsible for guiding the black dragon on the right path. Now, after half a year of accumulation, Caesar had not been guided much, but the results of his research and development were remarkable. Then let her leave. Caesar shook his head. As a non-believer and ignorant of the law, he still did not have the means to enslave another ancient dragon. As for his psionic power, he was far from being that strong. Not to mention Einkorn leaving. Even if the silver dragon wanted to stay, Caesar would not agree. After tricking Bahamut and the metal dragons, keeping a follower of the platinum dragon god by his side was tantamount to a ticking time bomb. Einkorn did not even need to use her power. She only needed to add some bait to her rich knowledge and mislead the spellcaster team. This was enough to cause the budding magical power of the Northlands to go down the wrong path and complete the reversal of history. As for the spellcaster team's development slowing down and stagnating, this was something that could not be helped. At such a time, Caesar could not care so much about so many problems. Then what about the 2 red dragons? At this time, Hogg could not help but mention that the Knoll leader had once faced the legendary ancient dragon Kadozi. Just by facing it, he could feel the taste of death. That red dragon had left a deep impression on him. Let them leave as well. Caesar waved his tail casually. When he attacked and captured the red dragon, it was only to lure the color dragons to launch an attack and come out in full force. This goal had now been achieved. Now, he wanted to weaken his presence as much as possible to reduce the attention of the dragon god and dragon queen on this side. He wanted them to shift their focus to the war with their old enemies. Seeing the hesitant look on Hogg's face, Caesar smiled and added, "It doesn't matter. As long as they can survive this war, there will be plenty of opportunities to meet them in the future. They will come back." Chapter 301. Time passed. It had been 3 years since the Black Dragon Caesar went into hiding and hundreds of dragons fell into a chaotic battle. News spread like snowflakes. Even though Caesar did not deliberately collect information about the war, he could still receive countless pieces of news because he was nearby. First of all, the outer edges of the Northlands, the Tahala Desert, and even the territories that Caesar had abandoned were now completely destroyed. The young and old dragons that swarmed here were capable of using 10,000 different methods to beat up the weak native species of the Northlands. This war had implicated countless innocent bystanders. Many species of the Northlands only existed in name only. Even the areas that Caesar had intentionally protected had been damaged multiple times. And in the first year after the war began, the ancient golden dragon Stannis, who was known as the Gilded Fire, and had met Caesar once before, shone brightly. He defeated the arrogant red dragon Kadozi and helped the metal dragons completely seize the initiative. This guy was indeed powerful. His spellcasting ability and physical strength had both reached the peak. He was definitely a top champion and one of the leaders of the entire Iradia Metal Dragons. With the highest spellcasting ability of all the true dragons on this battlefield, the name Gilded Fire, Stannis was like a great demon king to the colorful dragons. For the next half a year, The colorful dragons who were ordered by the Dragon Queen not to escape could only shiver and hug each other for warmth. The evil dragons were in a constant state of panic. They were suppressed by the metal dragons. During the time when the red dragon Kadozi was recovering, they could only defend and could not fight back. However, stories always had a dramatic twist. Just a while ago, a female blue dragon who came from nowhere appeared out of nowhere. This female blue dragon was a lone dragon. Her size was between an ancient dragon and an ancient dragon. She did not even have any kin, but she was unbelievably powerful. She tore apart the powerful true dragons of the metal dragons many times in battle. The dragon descendants, dragon bloodline vassals, and kind-hearted kin were also slaughtered by her in batches as if she was cutting chives. Gilded Fire, Stannis was forced to fight personally, but he was kicked to death in no time. He was beaten to the point that he had to use a teleportation spell to escape far away, and then he had to sneak back to his own camp. There were no secrets to speak of in front of the Platinum Dragon God, let alone in the midst of a critical war. Thus, under Bahamut's gaze, this unreasonably powerful blue dragon quickly revealed its true form. The true dragons now knew that this blue dragon was actually a secret bloodline that Tiamat had left behind in Iradia. Though it was an intergenerational descendant, as a direct descendant of the Dragon Queen, this blue dragon possessed a powerful bloodline that was almost equal to the ancestral true dragons. It also possessed the most powerful innate ability in the prime material plane. Apart from that, its body also possessed all sorts of unparalleled abilities that were on par with legendary true dragons. Coupled with the dragon's painstaking research in battle and the natural advantage of draconic aura, it should be the most powerful true dragon that had appeared today. It was also one of the most powerful creatures in the northern continent, perhaps even in all of Iradia. It was worth noting that tens of thousands of years had passed since Tiamat descended to the mortal world and entered Eladia in the Third Era. Logically speaking, if the blood descendants she left behind did not die, they should have grown to the point where they were close to becoming gods. They should have been rejected by the main material world and entered the astral world. However, this blue dragon did not seem to have reached the age of 1,000 years. After further investigation, the metal dragon discovered that its power had been deliberately suppressed by Tiamat. Its power level was within the threshold that Iradia could bear without any rejection. This blue dragon was the secret weapon that the Dragon Queen had left behind in Iradia. It spent most of its time sealed, unable to feel the passage of time. It would only awaken when necessary to protect the Dragon Queen's dignity and stabilize the position of the evil dragon. What Tiamat really wanted to use to deal with Caesar was not those young and old dragons, nor was it the legendary red dragon Kadozi. It was not even her own apostle who had descended. Instead, it was this bloodline that had been sealed for a long time and hidden deeply. However, Caesar was extremely crafty. After dragging the metal dragon and the rainbow dragon in, he slipped away without a word. The blue dragon bloodline that Tiamat had prepared was thus useless. It was accidentally used to deal a blow to the metal dragon that was growing in power. The existence of the blue dragon bloodline was something that even Bahamut did not expect. The Dragon Queen had spent a lot of effort to deceive him. It was to the extent that Bahamut only realized that the Dragon Queen had placed such a hidden card in Iradia when this dragon was completely exposed. After all, the original divine title of the Dragon Queen was the Dragon of Trickery. She relied on scheming to devour her brothers and sisters to climb up the ranks. When it came to playing these tricks, the pure and kind Platinum Dragon was no match for Tiamat. The appearance of the blue dragon caused the situation in the northern lands to change drastically. Most of the metal dragons were mage dragons that focused on spell casting and strength. The only one that was especially strong, with both magic and physical strength, Gilded Fire, had already been proven to be no match for the blue dragon. There was no need to mention the rest. As the granddaughter of the five-headed Dragon Queen, the blue dragon's physical resistance was not inferior to some legendary-level dragon species. This meant that many spells and energy attacks were ineffective against it. Against the main forces of the metal dragons, the blue dragon could take on 4 to 5, or even 6 to 7 gold dragons and silver dragons. Even if they were able to surround and defeat the blue dragon, the metal dragons would find it difficult to truly kill it. The blue dragon's terrifying recovery speed meant that it would be able to make a comeback very quickly. The Dragon Queen's subordinates and dragon descendants that were sent to fight the blue dragon were simply food for the blue dragon. This caused the metal dragons to fall into an awkward situation. It wasn't that Bahamut didn't think of using the apostles to punish this dazzling blue dragon, but the Dragon Queen would always follow closely behind him. Not to mention, the apostles without the support of divinity might not be able to do much to this powerful blue dragon in a one-on-one battle. There was even the risk of being killed. The invincible blue dragon Sylvie Alex replaced the red dragon Kados and was welcomed by the passionate color dragons as the new leader of their side. From then on, the Tyrant became her nickname, spreading from the Northlands to the continent. Coupled with the evil dragon descendants that appeared one after another to join the battle, the difference in high-end combat strength between the two sides was rapidly shrinking. The consecutive losses caused the morale of the metal dragons to plummet. Some thoughts of retreating and giving up started to spread. The balance of the battle was quickly tipping towards the evil dragon's side. Just as they were stuck between a rock and a hard place, the metal dragons suddenly thought of a tyrant that they could deal with. Note: evil dragon descendants, the product of Tiamat's magical experiments and forcefully awakening the evil powers of the color dragons. Usually, only a single egg in a nest would be affected. A specific evil dragon descendant would only match the color of the dragon that gave birth to it. Together with the word descendant, it formed a part of its name. For example, the black dragon descendant and the white dragon descendant. The evil dragon descendants rarely stayed with their parents for long periods of time. They were unreservedly loyal to Tiamat. Their maturation speed far exceeded that of the true dragons. They only needed a few years to reach adulthood, but the price was that they would permanently lose their reproductive ability. Chapter 302. Caesar didn't know that he had been targeted by the metal dragons once again because of a blue dragon. In fact, he didn't carry out any evil plans during this period of time. Tiamat's true blood was a very rich treasure that required a long time to excavate. So, besides sleeping and digesting the potential of Tiamat's true blood, Caesar spent all his time playing cards with little Luna, living like a Buddhist true dragon. At the same time, because of the Black Dragon Emperor's inaction, the power of the new empire had shrunk, giving up almost half of its territory. The Blackwing clan had almost all moved back to the Green Field and reorganized their original base. Their daily life was hunting, eating, training, and breeding. The Demolik and his subordinates all went underground and focused on studying magic. Tiamat's blood greatly increased the strength of Caesar's blood. After a period of digestion, Caesar successfully entered a new round of growth hibernation. This speed was faster than expected by a few years, which made Caesar very happy. The hibernation lasted for 2 years, and after that, there were several small periods of hibernation. Just when he was finally free from this period, the leader of the Blackwing clan immediately sent him a message. "Your Majesty, a gold dragon has appeared in our blockade line. It claims to be the messenger of the Platinum Dragon God. Should we drive it away?" The Platinum Dragon God sent someone? Caesar thought about it and decided to meet him. At the same time, he told the Blackwing clan in the dragon nest to make preparations. He did not have much contact with the metal dragons, but he had already offended the Platinum Dragon God and was close to offending him. Although Bahamut always had a good reputation of being pure and kind, he could not let his guard down. However, the other party did not seem to have any obvious evil intentions. In the Northern Territory, the environment here had become worse with the destruction of the war. The north wind continued to howl as if it would never stop, but it could not blow into the range of the royal court. An invisible barrier separated the inside from the outside. Now that the royal court had been rebuilt, the majestic building extended hundreds of meters from the inside of the mountain. The complex magic veins were like its vigorous roots that went deep into the ground. The four sharp cones at the top pierced into the sky, like dragon claws that closed upwards. The owner of this place opened the door to welcome the guest. Although Caesar was much stronger, he did not put on an arrogant attitude. He politely greeted the messenger of the platinum dragon god with a clear sense of distance. "What a delightful reunion, Your Excellency Caesar." The gold dragon in the form of a male elf had a reserved smile. After crossing the porch, he bowed slightly and nodded. The etiquette was perfect. "We meet again." Caesar lowered his head and looked at this unexpected guest with a scrutinizing gaze. He let out an ambiguous laugh. "Yes, we meet again, Mr. Stannis." The gilded wildfire, an ancient gold dragon that was more than 1,500 years old, one of the leaders of all the gold dragons in Iradia. Although they had only met once, Caesar had a deep impression of this fellow. Using his increasingly powerful psionic power and the perception enhanced by the bloodline of the Dragon Queen, Caesar was able to see through its disguise and catch a glimpse of its true form. After that, Stannis returned to his original form. His enormous dragon wings extended from his back to the tip of his tail, becoming smaller in the shape of waves. About 10 symmetrical tentacles were distributed around his lower jaw, and sharp dragon horns extended back along the tangential line of his eyes. Below the horns was a pair of long and sharp ears that could move flexibly. Caesar had always despised Iradia's dragons for being too slender and ugly. But there was no doubt that compared to the majestic Black Dragon Lord, the ancient gold dragon also had a majestic beauty. The gold dragon's pupils were also gold, and there was a vertical slit in the iris. It was no different from Caesar's pupils except for the color. Stannis' eyes were calm as he looked at the black dragon calmly. "Good day, ancient and powerful gold dragon." Caesar took the initiative to speak with a powerful voice. "What made you leave the frontline battlefield to visit a black dragon that no longer cares about worldly affairs?" "Heh, no worldly affairs." The meaning of this word was too subversive. If not for the gold dragon's good manners, he might have torn this damned fellow apart. Stannis took a deep breath and said, "Lord Caesar, allow me to remind you. You have betrayed our alliance and withdrawn your forces. You have ignored the oath you made to His Majesty, the Platinum Dragon God, Bahamut. You have placed the entire Metal Dragon race in danger." He immediately pinned a big label on Caesar. His words were full of dissatisfaction and almost harsh criticism. "Please do not forget that we came to the north at your invitation to help you." These harsh words did not embarrass Caesar, because he knew very well that these facts did not need to be repeated. If the Metal Dragons wanted to fight, they would have already joined in. There was no need for so much nonsense. Although the Gold Dragon seemed to be speaking righteously, he did not have much confidence. There should be more to come. "My apologies." After thinking this through, he did not evade and openly admitted this point. "In the process of the battle with the evil Dragon Mother's apostle, I was heavily injured and almost lost all ability to move. In the end, I had to withdraw from the battlefield. The reason I gathered the forces of the clans under my command was because I needed their protection. You know, a true dragon like me without the protection of a god does not feel safe. If that is the case, you should seek help from the Platinum Dragon God. No matter what injury, His Majesty Bahamut has the ability to heal you." Stannis pursed his lips, his beard swaying slightly. Of course, he didn't believe a single word the Black Dragon said. However, he wasn't here to pursue the matter, so he didn't care too much about it. Both sides pushed the blame to each other and glossed over the matter. After a pause, he continued, "I will explain this to His Majesty Bahamut. I hope this misunderstanding has not killed our friendship in the cradle. Your Excellency Caesar, have you fully recovered from your injuries?" "Basically, there are no major problems." Caesar stretched out his front claw and made a no-problem gesture. He realized that the Gold Dragon's opening remarks and prelude were over. It was time to express his true intentions. He waited for Stannis to speak. "That is good, because the Metal Dragons are in danger and are waiting for your help." As he expected, the Gold Dragon's next sentence finally brought up the main topic. As one of the Metal Dragons who had a lot of dealings with humans, Stannis had a fine control of the art of speech and the patience of his opponent. Now, he spoke neither abruptly nor slowly. It was just right. Chapter 303. Sounds like you've encountered a huge problem. Still, Caesar continued, the entire metal dragon race, and even His Majesty Bahamut, find the problem troublesome. What help could I, an insignificant and weak black dragon, provide? To hell with the weak black dragon. If it weren't for the fact that he had a mission to complete, Stannis really didn't want to say another word to this damn fellow. Everyone in Eladia knew that this fellow had annihilated half of the legendary ranked dragon hunters with a single breath. At the same time, its terrifying might had almost wiped out all of his own kin. The saying, "strike my enemy, kill my friend," came from this incident. Which black dragon in all of Eladia could do such a thing? Caesar Ordoronzo Tangerine had the power comparable to the ancestral true dragon at the same age. This was a fact known to all dragons in Iradia. Stannis gave the flattering response that Caesar was expecting. His eyes glowed brilliantly as he cast a non-lethal effective spell, causing a three-dimensional projection of the court to appear. The floating light particles condensed, and the light wrapped around a blue dragon. Its neck was slender and smooth, and its scales were extremely fine. Its body was also slender, which was rare among dragons. This dragon's phantom had a strong upper body that far exceeded that of ordinary true dragons. Its hard and ferocious facial armor was awe-inspiring, and the electric arcs that jumped all over its body showed its identity. A blue dragon. However, unlike the current generation of blue dragons, this blue dragon had a completely different segmented wing structure that was as sharp as a blade. This structure weakened its gliding ability, but greatly increased its agility. Its short-range bursts were even more swift and violent. Even though it was only a shadow in front of it, it still revealed an indescribable sense of power. Tyrant, Sylvie Alex. She is the direct descendant of the Penishade Dragon Queen. She has the unparalleled power of Iradia dragons, the golden dragon introduced. Her unique physical resistance is on par with the legendary dragons. Her natural ability, Thunder Abyss Prison, is also the most terrifying. To be honest, we can't do anything to her now. TSK. Caesar had heard of the name Tyrant before, but he had never seen this direct descendant of Tiamat. He stared at the ferocious and strong blue dragon in the projection for a while before turning to ask Stannis. Not even you? Strictly speaking, I'm no match for her. Stannis' voice was filled with helplessness, but he was cursing the black dragon in his heart. He even suspected that Caesar knew some details of the battle and purposely targeted his weak points. Now that the front line was in full swing, if he had a way, why would he leave and come here to seek help? But this time, Stannis had really wronged Caesar. He didn't have the bad taste of exposing someone's scars. The only reason he asked was to get an affirmative answer from Stannis. By comparing it with Stannis' assessment value, he would have a rough estimate of the tyrant's strength. So you came to me, hoping that I can help you deal with this blue dragon? Yes. Stannis nodded. The black dragon had already asked what he wanted to say in advance, so there was no need for him to beat around the bush. He was here for this anyway. Okay, I agree. Caesar agreed casually. Before Stannis could show a smug smile, he added, but there's a condition. Everything before this will be written off. Although according to the settings, the black dragon and the metal dragons were mortal enemies, Caesar didn't have a deep grudge with them and was very willing to cooperate with them. At least with Bahamut's guarantee, he didn't have to worry about the metal dragons falling out with him. If he were to negotiate with the Penishade dragons, it wouldn't be so easy. Since the misunderstanding has been resolved, we naturally won't do anything out of line to you, Stannis said. He was originally here on Bahamut's orders. He wanted to use the Black Dragon's previous breach of the agreement to threaten and request the Black Dragon's help in the name of the Metal Dragons and the Platinum Dragon God. Now that Caesar had taken the initiative to mention this, both sides hit off. You also know very well that Alex is very powerful. I may not be able to kill her or even defeat her. I can only guarantee that I can delay her for a while. It's enough to just stop her. Unlike the previous twists and turns and schemes, Caesar sincerely wanted to reach a deal with the metal dragons this time to write off their previous grievances. After all, offending two dragon gods at the same time was really not a good choice. There was no way to salvage the situation with Tiamat, but there was still a chance to deal with the Platinum Dragon God. At the same time, he could take action to stop Alex, rebalance the situation of this war, and let the war continue to be anxious. Caesar was the hidden beneficiary of this war to the end, so he naturally wouldn't refuse. The Black Dragon began to state his request in detail. I hope that His Majesty Bahamut can promise that during this process, he will not harm me, my territory, or my kin in any way. In order to be able to complete the mission perfectly, I need you to provide all the information you have on the Blue Dragon Alex. Please be assured of your safety. During this process, if Tiamat's apostles take the opportunity to kill you, His Majesty Bahamut will not sit by and do nothing. The complicated and repetitive details were finalized word by word. Stannis didn't have much time. After quickly discussing some basic matters of cooperation, he said that there would be other metal dragons in charge of contacting Caesar next time and prepared to get up and leave. Please wait a moment. Before leaving, Caesar snapped his fingers and stopped Gu Jinlong, who had already turned his back slightly. The sound of the scales on his claws rubbing against each other was frighteningly loud. It echoed clearly in the empty Blackwing Palace. After a short wait, a team of demon hounds stepped into the palace, and the things they brought with them shocked Stannis. They brought with them 3 weak metal dragons. Gu Jinlong's eyes quickly surged with boiling flames. He let out a low dragon roar, and his draconic aura spread out uncontrollably. Before he took any drastic action, Caesar explained, "These 3 true dragons trespassed into my territory while I was asleep, and my kin did not harm them. They were already heavily injured before and tried their best to escape here. After that, they completely lost the ability to move and were taken in by us." Stannis looked at these guys and couldn't help but sigh at the copper dragon's stupidity. The metal dragons had long spread the news of their disappearance, but he never thought that these guys would be in such a panic that they flew to the territory of the Blackwing King, whose attitude was unclear at the time. "No matter what, I thank you for your help on behalf of the metal dragons." Stannis began to cast healing and buff spells. At the same time, he thought to himself that if he hadn't found the Black Dragon and Caesar this time, or if negotiations had broken down and fallen out with them, these 3 copper dragons might have become a weapon that Caesar used to threaten them in the future. He didn't know if this was all of the metal dragons in his hands, or just a part of them, and needed to be verified. With hesitation and speculation, Stannis took a deep look at Caesar and quickly returned to the metal dragon's camp. He needed to report to His Majesty Bahamut and, at the same time, begin to finalize the counterattack plan. Chapter 304. The Northern Domain welcomed the long-awaited rainy season. Dark clouds covered the sky, and rain poured down from the sky, hitting the stone steps and glass, making pitter-patter sounds. Logically speaking, the warm and humid rainy season should have come long ago, but in the Northern Domain, ever since the long and worrisome war began, the number of times it rained due to the strong energy could be counted on one hand. The long period of drought made the already barren soil in the Northern Domain unable to bear the burden, and all the properties fell below the previous level. Now, the heavy rain dispelled the dullness in the air. Luna tried her best to open the window, letting the fragrant smell of the earth into the room. Looking from afar, she could see that the crops on the other side of the Rapids River had sprouted new buds, and the green wheat sprouts stretched endlessly, stretching as far as the eye could see. The planting plan finally achieved results after 4 years of implementation. Under the washing of the rain, the crops were extremely bright, forming a sharp contrast with the gray and gloomy Northern Domain. Caesar yawned and threw a large piece of beef bone in his claw into his mouth, chewing it. "Leaving?" Luna asked. "Yes, I can't completely offend both dragon gods. Helping the Platinum Dragon God get back at him is the best choice at this stage." Caesar closed his teeth and used his tongue to clean the blood and meat around the corner of his mouth. Tyrant Alex is my target. Do you want to hear the plan? Nope. Luna turned her back and curled her lips. You always win in the end anyway. It's not certain this time. The big black dragon laid his head flat next to her. The information given by the metal dragons shows that Alex is Tiamat's granddaughter, the bloodline of the ancestral true dragon. In terms of actual combat strength, the blue dragon is probably more powerful than the evil dragon mother's projected apostle. Caesar said in a low voice. However, if that fellow was used to deal with the metal dragons, it should have been exposed a long time ago. In the repeated epics, the evil dragon mother had countless opportunities to use it to deal with the metal dragons. You're saying that the blue dragon might have been specially awakened by the evil dragon mother for you? Luna's eyebrows were knitted together. It's not a possibility, it's definitely one. Caesar deduced. The dragon queen is not a black-blooded beast. She would not risk her divinity to descend. Therefore, she should know that an apostle of this level might not be able to defeat me. Therefore, she awakened Alex and prepared to let the blue dragon hide behind the scenes to deal a fatal blow. However, an accident happened later. The metal dragons joined the occupation, and I took the opportunity to withdraw from the battlefield. Things developed beyond the Dragon Queen's control, and Alex became a weapon against the metal dragons by accident. According to what you said, the Pinochet Dragon Queen knew of your strength and still chose to use the blue dragon as her trump card. This means that she has absolute confidence. A cause, a slip of the tongue. It's very likely that it has some powerful ability that specifically restrains you. Luna looked worried. She looked up at the big black dragon and said, "It's very dangerous. Caesar, do you still want to go?" "I'll go." The black dragon, who was lying on the ground, spat out 2 streams of white gas. If possible, he did not want to deal with the 2 dragon gods anymore. He wanted to wait for their forces in Iradia to be destroyed and then stay in the north to play by themselves. However, it was very difficult for things to develop in Caesar's favor. Bahamut and Tiamat were not fools. If he were to fall out with the 2 dragon gods at the same time, he would not be able to do it with his current strength. Therefore, in the end, Caesar had to compromise with reality and contribute to the great cause of the Platinum Dragon God. Tyrant, Sylvie Alex, with the power of the Metal Dragon race, they had yet to force her to her limits. Coupled with the divine power of the evil dragon mother, at this stage, other than Tiamat and the blue dragon herself, even the Platinum Dragon God did not know where the blue dragon's limits were. To be honest, even Caesar himself was not sure. However, he wanted to try. Ever since the god of the hunt, Malor, had sent out the first reward, the Black Dragon Lord's power had been growing like bamboo shoots after a spring rain. The specific data in the Comprehensive Ability Assessment device showed that the Black Dragon Lord's power had reached more than 1,400. Although this was still far from being a true god, it was already the pinnacle of power among the races that Iradia often saw. Even the legendary Ancient Dragon, the leader of the Gold Dragons, Stannis, only had a combat ability assessment value of 1,300. The Ancient Red Dragon, Kadozi, had barely reached 1,200. Due to Caesar's powerful body and special means, it was not as simple as it seemed. The Platinum Dragon God had already nodded and agreed to help the Metal Dragons fight against Alex once. After a series of exchanges of benefits, the grudge between the 2 sides was written off. Even the good Dragon King could not get rid of his desire for wealth, but Caesar could. He did not care about the loss of wealth. And after this, the war would continue. He would also not have to worry about the hidden dangers caused by the metal dragons. He could cultivate his own land in peace. Enough. Stop. Caesar shook his head and muttered to himself. He could not continue thinking about it. This kind of thinking was the same as, "I'll wash my hands of the gold basin and be a good person after this job." He did not have full confidence in this operation, so he could not put a flag on himself again. After comforting Luna for a while, Caesar left the lair and returned to the battlefield of dragons. Even though the Black Dragon did his best to keep a low profile, using psionic powers to hide the loud rumbles and dazzling flames he emitted as he flew and did his best to hide his whereabouts. His huge body could not be covered with psionic powers. Therefore, both the metal dragons and the rainbow dragons knew that the black dragon, who had previously hidden from the battlefield, had returned. King of the Black Wings. Low murmurs sounded one after another, and the true dragon's expressions were rather complicated. Although the Pinochet dragons in this place yearned for Tiamat's reward and wanted to kill the black dragon to claim credit, they actually did not hate the black dragon to speak of. At the same time, due to the Pinochet dragon's worship of power and champions, they even held a kind of respect for the powerful black dragon who dared to resist the Dragon Queen. Unfortunately, such respect was not a good thing. If they had the chance, they would not hesitate to kill Caesar without regard for their own safety. Using the most vicious means to defeat a stronger opponent was a conventional way for the dragons to express their respect. On the other hand, Caesar's arrival to assist the metal dragons should logically be welcomed by the metal dragons. The addition of the Black Dragon Lord greatly increased their strength and helped them spread the Platinum Dragon God's love and selflessness, attracting more potential Pinochet dragons to join them. However, the truth was that not a single metal dragon showed any warmth toward Caesar. All of them treated him with indifference. The reason was that the Black Dragon had previously betrayed their sacred covenant. Unlike the Pinochet dragons, the metal dragons valued oaths and took pride in keeping their promises. They would never accept someone like the Black Dragon Lord, who had been proven to be two-faced, as a comrade. If not for the pressure from Alex, they would not even seek the help of the Black Dragon and complete the transaction. Instead, they would choose to remember this grudge and wait until the matter was over before settling the score. Caesar's previous actions had obvious consequences. Even if the metal dragons promised to write off the grudge between them after this, the cracks had already appeared and there was no possibility of repairing them. From now on, the best outcome would be for him and the metal dragons to have no contact with each other. Therefore, although the Black Dragon's appearance had attracted widespread attention, the surrounding people all looked at him with either indifference or malice. There was no situation worse than this. Chapter 305. However, Caesar himself did not care about such a situation. He completely ignored the gazes of these fellows. Most of the true dragons that appeared on the battlefield were soldiers recruited by Bahamut and Tiamat. Among the dragons, those who could be so obedient were rather devout believers, even if they were not fanatics. These believers were not the kind of people that Caesar wanted to deal with. Previously, just instigating the Elven Queen, Kasia, was enough trouble, and the effect was not as perfect as he had imagined. Even if he wanted to establish the Dragomaw clan for his own kingdom in the future, his target would not be the believers of the two dragon gods. Regardless, the addition of Caesar Tangerine had boosted the morale of the metal dragons. They knew why he had come, and after receiving the signal from their leader, the metal dragons rose into the sky, roaring and urging their kin to attack. Caesar gazed at the vast battlefield that had lasted for nearly 4 years. At the end of his vision, the rolling hills had disappeared without a trace, replaced by black ground. Both the colorful dragons and the metal dragons had shed blood in this war. Of course, the main blood was their kin. Countless orcs, ogres, elves, and half-dragons were fighting on the ground. He looked past the ugly and dirty barracks of the ogres, circling around the rotten and twisted nest of the colorful dragons in an attempt to search for the blue dragon Alex. According to the number of simple tents, multiplied by a factor, there were only about 50,000 evil dragon minions in this place. The number of metal dragon minions that were fighting against them was estimated to be more than 100,000. Their numbers were double that of the enemies. In addition, Caesar also saw a large number of human soldiers, as well as fellows who emitted various divine radiances. It seemed that the protracted war between the two dragon gods had attracted the attention of other, just gods who liked to meddle in other people's business, and had sent priests and paladins to participate in it. This was indeed the case. The anxious war and the flying shadows of the dragons had become events that could be recorded in the annals of the Iradia era in the past 3 years. This was the largest and most widespread war in the North so far. Although the metal dragons had done an impeccable job of gathering the forces of justice and commanding them, the Dragon Queen still had a backup plan. This time, not only did the color dragons have Alex, but also a large number of evil dragon descendants. Magical experimental weapons had poured in. In Caesar's eyes, he also saw the light of tyranny, plunder, murder, and so on. The evil gods had also joined the war, exerting influence here. So although they had an obvious advantage in terms of numbers, the metal dragons were still at a disadvantage. Compared to Alex, the first color dragon that Caesar noticed was Cadeau's. The red dragon's dragon power was stronger than the other color dragons, so it was easy for Caesar to sense it. Of course, Cadeau's noticed the gaze of the black dragon lord. At this time, he could not show his cowardice in public, so Cadeau's fiercely and proudly stared back, but it seemed that he was not confident enough. Caesar rose into the sky and hovered above the clouds, overlooking the battlefield. He did not want to fall down just yet. Alex did not enter the battlefield as quickly as he expected. The black dragon needed some time to observe the situation and judge the situation. Below, the battlefield of the good dragon and the evil dragon stretched across the entire hilly area, but the boundary between the two sides was clear. The hills on the good dragon side were normal, and there was even a trend of evolution like a forest, but most of the evil dragon side had become a bumpy swamp, dry land, and desert, and there was a mixture of stench mixed with various smells. Maintaining a flying altitude, Caesar slowly entered the battlefield and began to approach the evil dragon's habitat. Other than the Draconians, the evil dragon's family structure was similar to Caesar's to a certain extent. Most of the main forces were the green-skinned orcs and gnolls, but their level of elite could not be compared to the Blackwing clan. This group of people held crude metal and stone weapons, and wore the same crude leather and plate armor, shouting and attacking the righteous army. In addition, there was a small group of clans that were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. They came from the Underdark. From Caesar's point of view, other than the top combat strength of the true dragons, these fellows acted as if they were just doing their job. As a long-lived species, the true dragons did not feel anything, but after such a long war, their family had been penetrated by numbness. Instead of saying that the daily attacks and killings were military operations, it was better to say that it had become a habit. On the other hand, the righteous army's response plan was also quite simple. When the evil dragons came close to a certain range, spells and arrows would rain down on them. And when they suffered a certain number of casualties, they would be forced to slow down. Finally, Caesar saw his target. From the largest and most ornately decorated tent, a tall and beautiful woman with long black hair and blue eyes walked out. She stood on the head of another blue dragon's descendant. From this woman, Caesar could see the light of magic and the aura of a dragon that made him wary. The commander-in-chief who walked out of the tent seemed to be very dissatisfied with the subordinates below. She raised one hand, and energy gathered in her hand and flashed, turning the fleeing gnolls into dry corpses. Then, she raised a thunderbolt and pierced through the battlefield, tearing apart the magic barrier of the righteous army and completely destroying this simple line of defense. Under normal circumstances, Alex would not care about these ridiculous reptiles at all. She would only appear when a certain area had suffered a considerable blow. But today was different. The ancestral blue dragon suddenly wanted to show her authority, so the nearest deserters and enemies became her targets. After using a spell to drain the life of the enemy and breaking the enemy's line of defense, Alex looked with satisfaction at the fearful and awe-inspiring gazes around her. The obedience of the evil dragons to her orders had increased by a few percentage points. At this moment, Alex suddenly sensed something. She narrowed her frightening blue eyes and looked towards the sky. At the same time, a long and powerful dragon's roar reverberated in the clouds. Although all the creatures on the battlefield were enchanted with the magic to resist the aura of the dragon, almost all of them could not help but stagnate when the aura of the dragon poured down like a landslide. Even some adult dragons could not help but shrink their necks. Then, a huge figure broke through the clouds and dove down with a burning flame. Crown. Caesar's powerful command swept across the battlefield below. With the supplement of his psionic power, Caesar's control of the command had greatly improved. He could now control the range and the strength of the crown. This time, of course, it was the crown at its maximum power. The pressure was like a mountain rolling down. Chapter 306. Alex lowered her head and let out a laugh that grew louder and louder. She recognized the guy who had descended from the sky. It was her original target, the king of the Black Wings, Caesar Ordorunso Tangerine. Don't think that there would be any good-tempered guys among the color dragons. For example, an evil dragon like Alex, who had inherited all the natural instincts of the five-headed dragon queen, arrogant, crazy, cruel, and belligerent. Mutated dragon. A few words popped out of Alex's mouth. Her eyes were cold, making people shudder. The last descendant of the blue dragon, under her, seemed to be able to feel the emotions of its commander. It subconsciously clenched its dragon claws and plowed out 5 stone troughs. On the other side, although the black dragon seemed to be making a lot of noise, he actually had no intention of joining the battle. This guy had descended from the sky. First, he had used King's authority, followed by a set of 4 colorful breaths, causing a lot of damage. After making enough noise, and before he was surrounded, he had retreated in time. He patted his butt, shook his tail, and flew back into the clouds. Of course, before he left, Caesar did not forget to look in Alex's direction. The meaning in his eyes was self-evident. This was the simplest provocation and seduction. Any intelligent creature with normal intelligence could see through it. Alex was also very clear, but she did not care. The ancestral true dragon had the confidence and pride of an ancestral true dragon. Under the hidden protection of Tiamat, she wanted to catch up and kill it. She was not worried about any schemes behind the black dragon's back. Looking at the mutated black dragon that had risen into the air again, Alex's breathing calmed down. She jumped off the head of the blue dragon's descendant lightly and returned to her true form in midair. Her ridiculously huge, true form completely squeezed the blue dragon's descendant into a corner. Almost at the same time that Alex's 4 feet touched the ground, a bright teleportation circle appeared under her feet. The next second, the ancestral blue dragon appeared directly less than 50 meters above Caesar. She stared at him. "Mutated dragon, it's my first time meeting you. I'm very happy." Caesar stared blankly at the sudden appearance of the blue dragon, then replied, "How happy are you?" Alex choked on his words, and the cold aura that had been brewing was instantly swept away. Damn it, this isn't the way Iradia true dragons speak. These guys with strange souls are really scums that don't play by the rules. Perhaps you don't know, but I woke up this time because of you. After a pause, Alex maintained his dignified aura. "I'm very happy to see that the cowardly fellow who had previously avoided the war actually dares to return to this territory. It's too early for you to be happy," Caesar muttered. Without looking at Alex's expression, he increased the power of the bio-enhancement armor to the highest level and left the battlefield like a meteor with a long flame tail. The dragon battlefield was ever-changing and full of danger. Even Caesar could not guarantee absolute safety. If he were to fight with Alex here, he would have to be on guard against attacks from the dark at all times, which would be very difficult. He had to play to his advantage and try to find a place without outside interference to fight with Alex alone. "How dare you ignore me?" Alex roared furiously. Most of the Penishade dragons were capricious and easily angered. Ancestral dragons were even more so. After being ignored twice in a row, the blue dragon with the title of Tyrant was already beyond angry. However, ordinary flight alone would not be able to catch up with Caesar, so she used her continuous, instantaneous displacement ability to quickly catch up. As her emotions fluctuated, electric arcs appeared on her body. This ancestral blue dragon's eyes were filled with the desire to fight. The next moment, she made her move. The extreme Thunder Abyss prison was like an upside-down blue waterfall, chasing after the stars and moon as it flew toward the Black Dragon Lord. Every strand of electric arc could blast a hole through an ordinary creature. Caesar made a spiral turn that was difficult for ordinary true dragons to do, avoiding the surging electric arcs. However, this was not the end. Alex's spells came one after another. Vicious Curse, weakening resistance. Greater Lightning Chain attacked one after another. However, this was ineffective against Caesar. This guy was only one step away from completely becoming an insulator. Whether it was spells or divine spells, it was difficult to have the best effect on him. This was the initial test. After knowing this, Alex was not completely discouraged. Facing the Black Dragon who did not even look back, the Ancestral Dragon displayed a powerful divine spell, Time Delay. The whistling hurricane froze in the cage of time, and everything slowed down. In this area, the Blue Dragon stretched 1 second to 1 minute, and time seemed to be frozen. This was a divine spell that did not have an effect on Caesar himself, so it worked steadily. Alex opened a passage for herself and quickly arrived at Caesar's location. She came to the top of his head and swung her tail over. The storm was torn apart, and the swinging tail, full of divine power, was like a blow from the sky. However, in order to launch such an attack, Alex had to avoid the effect of Time Delay. So the moment her tail was about to touch Caesar's body, the effect of Time Delay disappeared. At this stage, although Caesar had time to think, it was difficult for him to have time to react. However, with his unparalleled, terrifying reaction, he still twisted his body and slapped back with his big claws to offset the tail swing, not causing him any damage. However, the collision caused by the feedback made it impossible for both sides to continue flying, and they fell at high speed in an unstable position. As soon as Caesar came into contact with the Blue Dragon's body, he immediately triggered several defensive spells. Thunder bombarded Caesar's body, but the mutated Black Dragon was almost immune to all spells. Both sides crashed into the rock layer of the mountain and fell dizzily, but they immediately stood up and roared together to fight. The furious Blue Dragon Alex, like other angry dragons of her kind, would not avoid a fight, not to mention that the opponent was a traitor that had been confirmed to be eliminated, a mutated dragon. But soon, she found that the other side was much more difficult to deal with than she had imagined. Although she had a slight advantage in terms of size and weight, this Black Dragon's strength in grabbing, hammering, and swinging tail was amazing. Alex spent a lot of effort to break free from the Black Dragon's bite, but there were already a few more buttons on her scales. What shocked Alex even more was the hardness of the Black Dragon's body. She thought that she had paid enough attention to this mutated dragon, but her sharp claws, which had always been successful, were blocked by the strange armor scales of the Black Dragon. When she found that she could only barely tear the opponent's scales with all her strength, the threat level of the mutated Black Dragon in Alex's eyes increased by more than an order of magnitude. What she did not know was that, at the same time, Caesar had almost the same idea as her. Before this, close combat was Caesar's absolute domain. No true dragon could compete with him, not even the Red Dragon, who was known to be the strongest in strength. If Caesar had not shown mercy last time, the legendary Red Dragon Kadozi would have been reduced to a pile of dragon bones. But this time, he was actually evenly matched with the Blue Dragon. The Black Dragon, who had temporarily separated, returned to the sky. Alex stared at the Black Dragon's nostrils and breathed heavily. Both of them were freaks that grew at an extremely fast rate. Whether it was their growth speed or the strength of their physiques, they were far superior to the average. It could be said that they were evenly matched. However, Caesar secretly frowned. The 35-meter-long mutated Black Dragon and the 37-meter-long ancestral Blue Dragon had a slight difference in body size and weight that could be ignored. Based on the current situation, his absolute strength was still above the Blue Dragon's. It still seemed like a good idea to engage in close combat. However, one thing that must be noted was that Alex was not ignorant of magic like him. The ancestral Blue Dragon's talent for magic was not comparable to the common Pinochet dragons. Sure enough, as Caesar expected, After a short escape, Alex began to enchant herself with magic. In the whistling magic light, Alex's body was covered with a layer of electric arcs. When the light dissipated, she was already covered with a layer of flowing energy armor. Her original wings were almost impossible to see, or it could be said that they had become thunder. In the original position of the dragon wings, jumping electric arcs extended from the bones of the wings, forming an even more exaggerated shape of thunder wings. With just a wave of his hand, the strong wind pressure caused a mess. The hurricane whistled, and the sand and stones flew. Alex came in front of Caesar, and his low voice was like a jumping electric current, fierce and violent. "Good fight, mutated dragon. Thank you for the compliment." Caesar grinned and slowly straightened up. He bared his sharp teeth at the blue dragon. Fine flame cracks spread out from his chest. His voice was like the crackling of exploding sparks. "You're not bad either." Next, the second round. Two voices said in unison. Chapter 307. The lightning that dashed out of Alex's back covered the entire sky. The term Thunder Abyss Prison was reflected in the most real way on her body. Like a tide that appeared in the sky, it contained the terrifying energy that could destroy everything. Lightning swirls that were expanding continuously appeared around her. The gathering clouds were gone, and the roaring hurricanes fled. The unfolding lightning was like a sky curtain, emitting soul-piercing brilliance. Tisk tisk. Looking at the magnificent scene, Caesar couldn't help but compliment, even though the two parties were in the middle of a confrontation. A power that can change the weather independently of the magic models. A true dragon with the bloodline of the ancestors finally looks like a giant dragon. Is that so? Alex's tone had already deviated from the category of creatures. It sounded like the sound of electric arcs colliding, sharp and ear-piercing. As a matter of fact, her wings and tail had been elementalized. Are you going to use that as your last words after witnessing the magnificent power of the ancestors? The sky of thunder rumbled. The area had been completely reduced to a windless zone, but three tornado-like lightning storms rose and locked onto Caesar from different directions. The black dragon opened its mouth, but what it breathed out was scalding hot air. After the fission furnace started working, its basic breathing ability had been strengthened. The febrile wind caused the temperature to be out of balance, and the air in its path was violently distorted. The three lightning storms let out terrifying roars as they collided head-on. Although the momentum was not as great as the other parties, Caesar's breath was even stronger than the lightning storm, instantly turning the lightning into harmless arcs of light. He increased the power and speed, shuttling through the lightning, trying to get close to the blue dragon's position. Alex smiled coldly. His chest also showed signs of elementization, further strengthening his ability to control energy. The lightning storm that poured down exploded at the same time. Forked lightning, blazing electric arcs, ionization spells, and so on shot out, including almost all of the low-level lightning spells. Walls, spheres, and rays of various forms of energy weaved into a net of destruction, further reducing the space that the black dragon could move in. Alex was right about one thing. This was indeed the unparalleled power of the ancestors of the true dragons. Caesar had never dealt with such a situation before. His previous enemies had basically chosen to give up on energy attacks after discovering his physical resistance. However, Alex was different. Her spells were endless and had already begun to cause damage to Caesar. After all, the Black Dragon was not a real legendary dragon and did not have the ability to completely ignore magic attacks like the power dragons. At least for now, he could not do that. However, it seemed a bit difficult to defeat the Black Wing King. Psionic disintegration. Caesar began to use the psionic power that he had studied for some time. Now, he could not only use psionic power to support his command ability, but he could also materialize it to form an impact on reality as a means of attack. Of course, due to the lack of power level, this kind of attack was mostly probing. Child's play. Alex felt the vibrations in her elementalization area and then raised her dragon claw. With just a wave, the psionic power that Caesar displayed turned into nothingness. However, what followed was the real killing move of the black dragon. As the crimson flames rapidly approached, the ripples of annihilation energy spread out, the dustless land. The elementalized blue dragon did not disappear. Instead, it burst into an even more dazzling arc of light. At the same time, the thunder canopy seemed to have lost control and collapsed with a loud rumble. Then it filled the sky like green smoke. The dustless land created a temporary dead magic area. In Alex's eyes, an anti-energy field spread out with the black dragon as the center, causing her to be unable to use any magic abilities. The ones that she had already displayed were also removed, including flying and elemental true form. The huge blue dragon instantly became a rootless duckweed and began to fall straight down. Caesar watched Alex fall. He knew that after a short pause, the blue dragon would break free from the influence of the dustless land and regain control of energy. He did not want to give her the chance. Fission breath. The beam of light exploded between his teeth, and the terrible energy flood drowned the blue dragon's body. However, Caesar's expression did not show any signs of slowing down. He could feel that the fission breath was blocked by something, and his heart sank. In an instant, the chaotic power of 5 colors exploded from the ancestral dragon's position, and the sky seemed to become colorful. Order returns to chaos. Justice gives way to evil. Praise the awakening of the Lord. Destruction is new life. The strange rhythm of the chant. Every word was full of evil power, and the breath of chaos filled the air. When she descends upon the earth, you can only choose to submit or die. Caesar's expression was strange. Below, a dark-scaled blue dragon replaced Alex's position. Its body was covered in thick, sharp skin, and its scales were not like a real dragon's. Instead, they were as fine as a snake's. Its mouth was full of sharp teeth, and the stubby horns on its nose extended outwards. This was a powerful, evil dragon's descendant, but now its body was full of holes, like a broken net that lacked repair. Some parts of its body had also been annihilated into dust. Before the torrent of energy completely dissipated, it had already died. At the same time, in another direction, the ancestral dragon Alex reappeared. Seething violence flickered in the slits of its vertical pupils. Tiamat's God bless. Caesar understood everything and turned to stare at her. Although the evil dragon mother is the common ancestor of the Penishade dragons, as an ancestral true dragon with independent will, you actually became a priest of the evil dragon mother. As he said that, he suddenly smiled. But it's also true. The blue dragon and the green dragon have always been the most loyal followers of the Dragon Queen. The ancestral dragons were all-powerful species that could travel in the astral plane. Most of them would choose to be loyal to their creator, but this did not mean that the ancestral dragons would dedicate everything to the Penishade Dragon Queen. It was rare for a true dragon to be a priest of the dragon god, even in the metal dragon camp. But Alex was an exception. Is there a problem? In the face of Black Dragon's mocking words, Alex was not angered, which was rare. Instead, she looked at him seriously and replied, "Unlike those idiots who have no faith and those who have shallow faith, Her Majesty Tiamat's gift is powerful and realistic. What reason do I have to refuse? Even if one day I die gloriously in battle, I can still be reborn in Her Majesty's God's kingdom. As for an arrogant and ignorant dragon like you, you have no chance after death. Your soul can only become the cornerstone of hell." As she spoke, Alex touched the smooth scales on her chin. Even though she had used blessing to avoid the black dragon's fission breath, her scales had softened to a certain extent under the extreme heat. Alex's words made some sense, but gods were never the object of Caesar's respect. In his opinion, gods were more powerful life forms, and believers were the lambs and slaves of gods. Giving up faith was something that Caesar could not do no matter what. He shook his head. The short conversation with Alex ended here. Caesar scratched his big chin, and his surging fighting spirit was gradually extinguished. All right, go back and find your evil dragon mother. At the end of the day, there was no deep hatred between them. Caesar had only promised the metal dragons that he would stop the tyrant, but he did not guarantee that he would be able to kill the tyrant. Now that both sides had used all their trump cards, it would be a strenuous fight to the death if they continued. The lazy black dragon did not have such thoughts. As an ancestral true dragon, Alex's intelligence was much higher than that of ordinary blue dragons, so she could easily understand Caesar's meaning. She raised her head and said, "Dragon with a different body, do you think you can leave so easily?" Caesar raised an eyebrow. "So, you plan to continue fighting and prepare to die here?" "Huh." The blue dragon let out a breath and let out a thunderous laugh. His eyes were full of fighting spirit. "In a sense, you are right. It is either you or me. There has to be a decent dragon to die for this show to end." "Very well." Caesar lowered his head, and a black light burst out from the gap between his vertical eyes. Then, the third round. Chapter 308. Alex began to bless herself with spells again. As an ancestral true dragon, even though she had yet to reach the ancient dragon stage, Alex had already reached the legendary stage and was gradually reaching the peak. The blood flowing in her body was filled with magic power, and countless high-level spells and talents were available to her. Alex cast blessings, energy armor, and first strike on herself in one breath, which made her perceptive and agile. The black dragon also raised his head and cast his ability, but it was not magic. This guy was still ignorant of magic until now. Instead, he used psionic power directly from the mind to distort reality. Psionic power was a form of power that was different from other professions. Mages relied on magic power to shape the elements and complete the casting of spells. Warriors and monks fought by tempering their bodies. The power of druids and priests was purely a gift from a powerful existence. Psionic power, on the other hand, was completely the embodiment of spiritual will. Its strength depended on the individual's development of spiritual power. This was a profession that required a lot of talent. If one did not have the talent to cross the threshold, the possibility of studying hard was next to nothing. In Iradia, and even in the entire astral plane, there were not many races that could control psionic power. There were a few, such as the Mantis people, the Grey Dwarves, and the Spirit Suckers. There were occasionally a few lucky ones among humans and elves, but they were very rare and even rarer among true dragons. But Caesar was an exception. It was not because he was a natural psionic warlock, but because the existence of Caesar Ordoronzo Tangerine was not a dragon in the ordinary sense, but a product of the successful fusion of the human soul and the black dragon soul. This was a double soul, which allowed Caesar to have a more solid foundation than most races in the astral plane, which became the cornerstone that supported his exploration of psionic power. Through this, it could be known that all dragons that appeared in this world theoretically had the possibility of becoming psionic dragons. At this moment, the sinister black dragon silently used an unknown ability, Mind Blast. Compared to other supernatural powers, Mana had an outstanding advantage. It didn't require any incantations or hand gestures, nor did it require any requests or materials to be prepared. All mana was instantaneous. Mana levels were also much more convenient than mages and priests, who had to rack their brains to figure out how to cast spells. Mana consumed spirit, or, in Iradia's professional words, spiritual appearance. Theoretically speaking, as long as their spiritual capacity was sufficient, there was no level restriction for psionic warlocks. They could use any psionic ability at will. For example, a mage apprentice couldn't cast a forbidden spell like 1,000 Miles of Ice, even if he had endless magic power, but a psionic warlock could. Of course, the prerequisite was to learn it first. The consumption of Mind Blast was not high, and it was the simplest and most basic manifestation of psionic energy. However, it still affected Alex to a certain extent when she was caught off guard, causing her to fall into a trance for a moment. And it was this moment that caused her to be flung far away by the black dragon's tail. However, when Alex used Soul Barrier on herself, the ability to affect her mind lost its effect. Attacks like energy bombardment and distorted ripples were nothing to the legendary dragon's defense. After that, the disadvantages of psionic energy gradually became apparent. After the psionic appearance matured to a certain level, it could rely on pure materialization to repair the body at high efficiency. It could also preserve the soul and reshape the body to revive the dead. If it was more powerful, it could even freely travel through timelines. But in the end, mana lacked direct and powerful offensive means. Perhaps for other psionic warlocks, this would always be an unavoidable weakness, but for Caesar, it didn't affect him at all. The powerful black dragon's body and psionic power complemented each other. Therefore, the scene had always been Caesar relying on his powerful physical strength and psionic manifestation to suppress the ancestral blue dragon. Fortunately, Alex could recover in a short period of time after being injured with divine spells and magic power repair, so she wouldn't be suppressed to death by the black dragon. For a moment, the battle became a battle of attrition. It depended on whether Caesar's strength and spirit would be exhausted first, or Alex's magic power and Tiamat's divine blessing on her body would be exhausted first. A group of lightning bats were summoned and let out ear-piercing screeches. Alex took this opportunity to start chanting the incantation of a high-level spell. Caesar stirred his throat and spat out a whistling ice storm. Before they could get close, these little guys that could self-destruct were shredded into pieces. Your elemental incarnation is very powerful. Why don't you continue? As the battle turned, Caesar didn't forget to trash talk and make mocking sounds. He was originally a dragon who didn't like to talk nonsense with other creatures, but Alex was a powerful opponent, and the black dragon wouldn't let go of any chance to affect her. The blue dragon didn't give a response and continued to chant. She was very smart. She realized that although maximizing elemental power and spell effects worked every time before, it was extremely inefficient in this battle. For this reason, casting elemental incarnation required double the consumption. Although it looked powerful, it didn't make up for the loss when dealing with the black dragon. Answer me, blue dragon. Bone-corroding strong acid swarmed in, trying to interrupt Alex's spell casting. But unexpectedly, after Tiamat's divine blessing was displayed, the ancestral dragon's chanting time was faster and shorter than before. High-level spell, time halt. Everything condensed again. The type of spell casting was similar to the time delay that was displayed before, but the spell effect was stronger and the duration was longer. At the same time, the evocation petrification that Alex temporarily adjusted came into effect. The mountain-like black dragon lord's movements were restricted by a layer of stone. There was no time to lose. Alex suddenly flapped his wings and teleported to the side of the black dragon statue. He grabbed it and crushed it. Stone debris leaked out from the gaps between the dragon's claws, but it stopped there. Alex was blocked. She couldn't twist the black dragon's neck. The blue dragon turned her gaze and stared. She found that stone debris rustled under her claws. The black dragon's scales exploded and shattered, but the steel-like neck didn't deform. What a pity. Caesar's strong physical resistance allowed him to quickly break free from time halt. He twisted his neck and clawed at Alex's right limb. Blood and flesh gushed out from the gaps between the black claws. Idiot, your strength is weakening. A battle of this intensity would be an extremely heavy burden for any living creature. Caesar was the same as Alex. Both of them had Tiamat's true blood flowing through their veins. However, the difference between them was that Caesar was a war weapon that had been injected with hormones multiple times. He was a monster through and through. Stories of fighting bravely had always only appeared in epics and legends. The truth was that Alex couldn't last as long as the Black Dragon. As time passed, her values in all aspects gradually decreased. Chapter 309. Alex's expression was cold as she completely gave up on the right claw and retreated. Less than 2 seconds after the dragon's blood gushed out, her healing magic took effect. The wound quickly stopped bleeding, and the broken claw reappeared. Tiny electric snakes flowed on her horns, becoming denser and denser. The light grew stronger and stronger, forming a dazzling blue light. The lightning rumbled as an incredible amount of energy gathered and did not dissipate. Compared to this, the lightning attack from Mailer's blue dragon was like a child's toy. Caesar used his lightning breath to counteract this attack and successfully approached Alex. The ancestral dragon did not escape, instead taking the opportunity to entangle Caesar again. But when the blue dragon successfully hugged the black dragon's head and opened its mouth to bite, the black dragon grabbed the small wound on the blue dragon's neck that had not yet healed and tore off the skin and flesh. A large amount of blood burst out from the side of the blue dragon's neck, and scarlet blood splattered all over Caesar's scales. The continuous injuries produced a strong sense of weakness, causing Alex to fall into a temporary state of exhaustion. This feeling gradually spread to her brain. Aware of the danger, the ancestral dragon frantically rolled its body, but the black dragon did not give up. It opened its mouth and bit down on Alex's wing bone, then shook its head, and the entire wing fell off. The black dragon bared its teeth, its eyes frightening, and its mouth full of blood. Logically speaking, a true dragon that had grown to such a stage would never easily engage in such a crude way of fighting. That was a trick that young dragons used to play with each other. Ancient dragons despised close combat and had always preferred to use their breaths and spells to suppress their opponents to death. But this time, the battle had reached its climax. Both sides were using everything, and after many methods were ineffective, they both chose to use the most primitive methods to cause damage to the other. Just as Alex said, a decent dragon had to die before this scene could be considered over. The loss of blood in her vital areas and the weakness of her upper body made Alex feel that something was wrong. It was not until her strong vitality dispelled the feeling of exhaustion that she recovered. Then she saw that the black dragon in front of her had become a double image, which made her realize that Caesar had used his psionic power again. She angrily scolded, "Despicable and cowardly black dragon! Can you only rely on your dirty spiritual energy to gain an advantage by taking a roundabout route? What a joke! Using spiritual energy is despicable? Then what did you cast on yourself just now?" Black Dragon let out a burst of disdainful laughter. He found that Alex was gradually weakening, and the scales of victory were tilting towards his side. If there were no accidents, this guy might really die here today. The blue dragon almost fainted from anger. Which true dragon did not use magic in battle? Someone like this guy who relied purely on physical strength was a real freak, right? The only praiseworthy thing about the black dragon was their glib tongue. She really did not know why Her Majesty Tiamat created these guys. While angry, Alex also felt a little self-blame and regret. She hated her own carelessness and underestimation of the enemy, which also made her more violent when facing the black dragon. Alex roared and spat out a dark blue, thunderous breath. In a list of spells cast, Mirror Image was not a high-level spell that was difficult to deal with, but Caesar completely used his spiritual power to manifest it. There was no mana fluctuation or flaw to speak of, which made it even more difficult for Alex to identify. The two mirror images and the black dragon spat out flames at the same time to offset the thunderous breath. Due to the bloodline, the blue dragon's breath was not much weaker than the black dragon's. So, although this breath was offset, it was not useless. Through the direction of the scattering of the flames and the change of temperature, Alex locked on to the direction where Caesar's real body was. She leaped and flew over. The blue dragon's 4 limbs with abnormally strong muscle strength gave her amazing jumping ability. But there was a problem with this leap. Just as her body was suspended in the air, Caesar showed a speed that was faster and stronger than her, and he was already in position to welcome her. The blue dragon had a bad premonition and subconsciously tried to dodge, but she did not manage to dodge half of it. The black claws instantly surrounded her, and she screamed in pain as she fell to the ground from midair, letting out a weak roar. Got you. Caesar had succeeded. He had completely caught the ancestral blue dragon that was slightly bigger than himself and completely suppressed her. The Pinochet dragons were all cruel and violent, and the black dragon, who had a different soul, was not much better than his own kind in this regard. So this guy had never shown any mercy, and he was ready to break Alex's neck. The ancestral blue dragon also realized that something was wrong and began to shake her body wildly. Her huge body, like a small mountain, caused a burst of sand and stones as she tried to break free. Boom! It was not Alex's lightning explosion, but Caesar was overthrown by a five-colored light that fell from the sky. Alex's struggle came to an abrupt end. She suddenly regained her freedom and turned to see Caesar fall heavily on the steep rock and roll all the way down, crushing countless rocks and splattering dark red dragon blood all over the sky. Tiamat! Caesar's anger and pain seeped out from his roar. It was the first time he had been seriously injured since he entered the legendary level. This five-colored light almost cut him in half. The flesh on his back was torn, and his organs and spine could be seen. The dizziness and intense pain from the sudden excessive blood loss hit his brain, making it difficult for him to even stand. His body's automatic control unit and strong recovery ability worked wonders. The blood stopped gushing out, and flames flowed between the wounds, pulling the separated muscles and bones together and preventing them from worsening. Caesar raised his head and looked at the sky. There was an aurora visible to the naked eye, and it was colorful. In fact, that was the intense energy reaction caused by the divine power of the five dragon queens crossing the boundary of the plane. Although he could not see it, he could imagine that the evil dragon Tiamat was standing in her own divine kingdom, looking down at this place through the endless boundaries, casting a gaze colder than a snowy mountain. At the same time, the ancestral blue dragon Alex stood up again. The black dragon's brain worked quickly. The more dangerous it was, the calmer he had to be. Alex was a powerful opponent. Just dealing with the ancestral dragon was already strenuous enough for him, and he had to use all his trump cards. He did not expect that after so many years, the Dragon Queen, who was busy every day, would still pay attention to this small area in Iradia, to the extent that she did not hesitate to use her divine power projection to descend again. There was no time to think about the cause and effect or how to deal with it. The second five-colored light descended like a divine punishment. The aurora in the sky revealed a tiny protrusion, like an eye-catching stain on a clean white paper. The stain grew longer and longer, and visually, it looked like a vast rainbow descending into a five-colored waterfall. It looked like the light was becoming more and more powerful, but in reality, its power was gradually weakening. Tiamat knew very well that the black dragon with a mutated body would not appear again for no reason. This fellow's arrival this time was very likely to have reached some kind of creed with the metal dragons, and that old bastard platinum dragon was very likely to provide him with protection. In order to avoid her old opponent, she did not use the apostles' descent this time. Instead, she directly crossed the endless barrier and cast divine punishment. However, the dimensional barrier was rather strong. The power of the gods was rapidly being consumed. It went from solid to loose and then to drifting. If Eladia had been even more isolated, perhaps the five-colored light would have collapsed and dissipated before it could even reach Eladia. Of course, the advantage of doing this was that Tiamat's divine punishment only took the blink of an eye from appearing to hitting its target. Other than the person involved, Caesar, even the Platinum Dragon Behemoth, did not have time to react. The light once again pierced through Caesar's body, and the giant centipede-like wound was torn open again. Chapter 310. The excruciating pain of his body being torn apart did not cause Caesar's mind to become muddled. If he stopped thinking at this moment, even if it was just for a few seconds, it could bring about fatal danger to him. Tiamat was the true ancestor of all evil dragons and a giant in the endless realms. However, Caesar already had a certain understanding of her. From his previous encounters with her and historical events, the five-headed dragon queen was a smart and powerful dragon god. She was not like the platinum dragon, who never used any strict dogma to regulate her followers. She was also unscrupulous and was one of the sources of evil and disaster in the endless realms. Tiamat was a gambler, but she was different from those who would put their lives on the wheel. She was used to choosing the right time to act boldly. As long as she thought that there was a chance of success, even if the chance was less than 10%, she would still act brazenly. If her footsteps were blocked, she would make a second judgment without hesitation. She would either give up decisively and wait for the next opportunity, or she would continue to increase the stakes and kill all of them. This was Caesar's definition of Tiamat. Of course, the most important thing was that Tiamat would consider the risks when doing things and leave a way out for herself. She was not like a certain god that Caesar had met before. Before the fight, the god was arrogant and had an arrogant look as if victory was within his grasp. But after he lost, he was filled with fear and shouted, "This is impossible." It was as if denying the result and avoiding the truth would not be of much use. Sorry, but that was Malor, the black-blooded beast whose mind was filled with chaos. There were many ways for gods to influence the main material world, but all of them required a high price. The simplest and most powerful way was to be like the god of the hunt, who used a small part of his divinity to bear the weight of a large amount of divine power and the descent of an apostle. However, Tiamat was not stupid. With the black-blooded beast as an example, she would not use such a method again. Even if the possibility of the black dragon being able to steal her divinity was very small, she would not allow such a possibility to appear. At the same time, in order to be one step ahead of the others and avoid the platinum dragon god's gaze, Tiamat did not choose to descend with a blood sacrifice or forcefully raise the power of her believers. Instead, she used divine punishment from outer space and launched a long-range attack during the battle between the black dragon and the blue dragon. God's punishment was the most effective way for a god to display their power, and its consumption was undoubtedly exaggerated. After crossing the material barrier, less than 10% of God's power was left. This meant that Tiamat had to use more power and pay a huge price to attack Black Dragon. But fortunately, this kind of consumption could be recovered. Alex lowered her body slightly and stared at the Black Dragon's strange body. She also stared at the sunset on the other side of the sky. She knew that the divine punishment was not over yet. She was patiently waiting for Tiamat to show her power again. She was prepared to deal a fatal blow to the Black Dragon when he was heavily injured and in the show. But out of Alex's expectations, the third attack did not come for a long time. The huge consumption and small results of the first two interdimensional divine punishments made Tiamat fall into a short period of contemplation. But in just a short moment, the Dragon Queen decided to continue increasing the stakes. She was determined to not leave any future trouble and kill the Black Dragon. A power that was hanging in the air quickly gathered. The earth that was gradually being covered in darkness was covered in a sunset glow again. The Pinochet Dragon Queen planned to use an even more powerful divine punishment. Observing the speed at which Tiamat gathered her power, Caesar judged that there was still some time. He began to do his best to start healing his existing injuries. At the same time, he saw Alex flapping her wings and squatting in a corner, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Using the ancestral blue dragon to threaten Tiamat? No. As a synonym for evil power, Tiamat's attitude towards her people was like how she treated her weapons and tools. She would never pity her believers, even if they were the ancestral true dragon believers. The Dragon Queen would never let these people get in her way. Moreover, the evil Dragon Mother and he were already irredeemable enemies. It was wishful thinking to make her stop. This method would not work at all. Then, should he wait for Bahamut's rescue? Although the good Dragon King never went back on his word, who knew when the Platinum Dragon would arrive? Perhaps he would already be dead by then. Caesar had never pinned his hopes on others. The divine punishment on the other side of the firmament had yet to descend, but it had already locked onto Caesar. Heavier and heavier pressure fell on his spine. The surrounding fine sand and pebbles jumped up and down, and the brittle rocks were already covered in cracks. In fact, after such a fierce battle, the ancestral blue dragon Alex had already been reduced to an arrow at the end of its flight. Although Caesar had the support of the fission furnace and was in a much better state than his opponent, he was no longer at his peak. It had to be said that Tiamat's timing was impeccable. There was no time to think. The divine punishment was about to arrive in a few seconds. Caesar's blood-red vertical eye glowed brightly as he used psionic energy to construct an energy field to surround himself. This insignificant ability alone was far from enough to stop Tiamat. Caesar also knew that this psionic energy field was not prepared for the evil dragon mother, but to isolate Alex's harassment so that he could focus on adjusting his body. The next moment, inside his body that no one knew about, the black dragon turned off the fission furnace. Few people knew that Caesar Tangerine, the king of the black wings, the powerful black dragon with a shiny steel jaw and full body armor, was actually a mobile nuclear reactor. The fission furnace was the source of Caesar's power. Its appearance came from the energy core's evolution after devouring the divine fragment of the god of the hunt. This crimson, glowing sphere in the black dragon's body had never been extinguished since its formation, even when the black dragon was in a deep sleep. But this time, Caesar took the initiative to turn it off. The black dragon, who loved to ponder about the fission furnace, had a considerable understanding of it. He even had a certain plan for its development. But in the end, these things were still in the theoretical stage. There was no preparation time or experimental basis. If it were any other time, Caesar would never fiddle with his body like this. This was not a small trick. With the situation inside his body, once there was a problem with the fission furnace, the entire north would be affected and turned into a wasteland. It would be a small matter. The black dragon's body was likely to be blown to smithereens. But now that a disaster was imminent, Caesar had no choice but to take the risk. The black dragon's breathing became heavy. After inhaling a large amount of air, not all of it was expelled. Part of it was compressed into Caesar's airbag. This part of the gas was very little, but it was enough for 3 breaths. Caesar's blood had never had such an exciting energy. The adaptive system constantly adjusted the load on his body. The matter in the fission furnace was rapidly energized. After maintaining a temporary free state, it began to rearrange itself. The pressure in the black dragon's body began to rise rapidly. Finally, the energy that he had collected for a short period of time in the airbag was pressed into the organ. Under the control of Caesar's subjective will, the furnace was restarted. The high temperature and high pressure airflow let out a terrible shriek and spurted out of Caesar's nostrils. Chapter 311. Everything had just begun. The rearranged nuclear materials collided in Caesar's furnace organs and quickly exceeded the critical mass. The black dragon bent down and suddenly opened his mouth wide. Blood gushed out of his mouth like lava, and his back that was full of thorns exploded from the inside out. Flesh and scales splashed everywhere. Logically speaking, according to Caesar's original expectation, the reconstruction of the furnace was a vast and long process. Everything should be done slowly and subtly, with the replacement and adaptation done one by one. But now the ability of the fission furnace had changed too much. His body could not bear such a burden in his current state. Fortunately, the furnace soon began to recover spontaneously. With the powerful energy, Caesar's cells grew again. The external manifestation of the operation pattern was that Caesar found that his scales and muscles were being crazily torn apart, collapsed, and then quickly healed and regenerated. Just when he felt that the pattern was acceptable, the furnace suddenly went out. Caesar's body swayed, intense pain and unbearable heat running through his entire body. Under Alex's astonished gaze, the mutated black dragon couldn't even let out a cry. It fell straight to the ground, kicking up a huge cloud of dust. It was not a simple fission reaction. Although it did not look much different from before, Caesar had actually rearranged the material structure and collision sequence in the furnace. He intended to ignite the fire of fusion. Without any time to think, Caesar tried to restart the furnace for the second time. Theoretically speaking, the plan was entirely feasible. However, his body had not been adapted and reconstructed with energy, and it was impossible for him to withstand such enormous power. Under the hidden protection mechanism inside his body, the nuclear furnace was automatically extinguished. However, it did not mean that Caesar had chosen the wrong path. The second time he forced it to open, the furnace that had been solidified into a physical state shrank a little and became smaller in size. However, more air was collected and filled. A magnetic field began to form. The black dragon's body firmly locked the radiation and rays from the reaction organs inside his body. Those were all precious energy that could be used to push up the upper limit of Caesar's body. The feedback coming from his body became gentler. The high temperature was no longer as hot as before. Instead, it turned into a burning sensation that he had never felt before. Boundless energy was pumped out of his furnace-like organs. He seemed to have succeeded. The powerful energy waves attracted Tiamat's attention. Sensing that something was amiss, the evil dragon mother stopped channeling her divine power to push it to the critical point. Instead, she calmly and decisively took action. A brilliant divine might descended upon the land. Endless divine power extended from the other side of the sky as a five-colored pillar of light descended rapidly. Everything it touched along the way was instantly annihilated, be it the clouds, dust, air, or even the prime material space itself was showing signs of instability. Hundreds of tiny spatial cracks flashed and disappeared at the connection of the material barrier that no one could see. There was nothing that could stop such a terrifying force. Long before the divine punishment arrived, the pressure had already descended. Two sources of light appeared on the hills outside the northern lands. One was the descent of Tiamat's divine punishment. The other was the radiance of nuclear energy released from Caesar's body. The turbulent waves of energy occupied a vast space. Thousands of crushed stones from the size of a fist to the size of a house were all lifted up by the unpredictable pressure and floated in the air. The five-color divine punishment and the radiance of nuclear energy complemented each other. Both emitted a powerful light that was difficult to look at directly. However, the difference was that the five-color divine punishment kept dissipating in the air as it passed through the material barrier and became weaker. On the other hand, the energy reaction of the black dragon, who was standing on 2 feet, was getting stronger. In just a second, the five-color divine punishment that blotted out the sky had already arrived in front of him. It had already locked onto the mutated black dragon and was unable to escape. It converged above Caesar's head like a whale sucking in water. The next moment, the edge of the beam of light brushed past the protruding mountain range and forcefully cut a section of the mountain. It flattened the mountain by at least 50 meters. The crushed stones that should have exploded were all reduced to ashes. The space let out a wail as the floating stones exploded at the same time. Caesar could even hear the roars of the evil dragons in Tiamat's divine power. Just as the air was annihilated by the divine punishment and formed a temporary vacuum, Caesar also pushed the energy of the nuclear fusion furnace to the peak. The countries in the northern lands thousands of miles away, as well as the true dragons in the battlefield of good and evil, would forever remember this strange day. In addition to the vast and beautiful five-colored rainbow descending from the other side of the sky, a large fireball that radiated light and heat appeared in the sky, a black sun. This time, it was not a breath. An indescribable energy condensed between the dragon's claws and was lifted up by Caesar. It was a dark red ball of light that was only the size of a human head. However, every wave that it emitted was frightening. For the first time, Caesar completed the release of energy. He manipulated the nuclear energy in his body to condense into a physical form. This was a terrifying crystallization of energy. Long before Caesar condensed the energy, Alex had already felt an unparalleled palpitation and goosebumps all over her body. This was not the divine punishment from Tiamat, but from this strange black dragon. If she was at her peak, the ancestral blue dragon might have been able to brace herself and stand where she was. However, at this moment, she had no confidence at all. She could only flap her wings and fly away, intending to wait until the dust settled before returning to investigate. The ball of light slowly rose up, leaving the creator's palm with a slight tremble. It flew faster and faster, heading straight for Tiamat's divine punishment. It peeled off the dark outer layer, revealing an extremely unstable essence, releasing an immeasurable amount of light and heat. There were no words that could accurately describe the moment when the five-color divine punishment and the nuclear energy particles collided with each other. The power that had reached the pinnacle was interpreted into a silent and colorless wave of energy. The originally calm space seemed to have been struck by a bomb. The extreme light and shadow effects were as if the world had been rebooted. The rumbling of the resonance was enough to drive people crazy. The clouds dispersed, and the turbulent flow of energy penetrated through the dimensions and space. At this moment, Caesar could even see Tiamat's cold and fierce dragon eyes, reflecting the deepest darkness and chaos in the depths of her eyes. It was not until a long time later that the Dark Mantle was finally able to regain control of the land. The tranquil and gentle crescent once again revealed its face. It cautiously sized up its surroundings, and only when it discovered that there was no light stronger than its own did it swagger its head out and once again spread the silver light over the land. Even though dragons had a layer of vertical eyelids to protect them, Caesar still fell into a temporary state of blindness. Even he was affected by the strong light and took a long time to return to normal. Caesar opened his dry eyes. The tear glands had a special protection mechanism for the lens. A few drops of tears fell from Caesar's eyes. The powerful collision of energy blasted the clouds thousands of miles away, and a circular hole appeared at the top of the sky. However, it was not over yet. Tiamat's eyes were cold. There wasn't any surprise or confusion in her eyes towards the strange black dragon's astonishing actions. The evil dragon mother, who was in her divine kingdom, could unleash all of her power. She continued to increase the stakes, and the fourth divine punishment was already brewing. Chapter 3:12. The strong light and extreme flames had long disappeared. The night sky was clear, and only the crescent moon was left. Tiamat did not suffer any losses. The divine power she had extracted from her divine kingdom was gone, but she did not stop there. She was still preparing for the next round of attacks. Caesar was not afraid of this at all. He had succeeded. The fusion fire burned fiercely in his chest. He was now different from the past. Although nuclear fusion and nuclear fission sounded similar, they were two completely different methods of energy production. The energy produced by the chain reaction of the former was several times that of the latter, or even more. Caesar floated above the hill, the peaceful aura on his face, as if he was sipping his afternoon tea. He was enjoying this moment of silence, and he was also feeling the feeling of his body being filled with power. The fusion fire was almost endless. The majestic energy supported his body, allowing the black dragon, who had reached the limit of his physical body, to not collapse. At the same time, he was rapidly repairing his body that was constantly collapsing at this stage. Overdraft was inevitable. The moment the furnace was reconstructed, Caesar's body was already riddled with holes. His self-healing ability was not enough to repair the scales that were constantly falling off. He could only pile up a portion of the nuclear energy here to forcibly repair and regenerate. Using a single claw to create an unstable sphere and hold it up, colliding with Tiamat's divine punishment. It did not seem difficult, and in fact it was indeed so. What really limited the black dragon was his body. This vessel was not ready to fully adapt to the fusion fire. After the two terrifying energies came into contact, they were quickly annihilated and canceled each other out. This allowed Caesar to test the threshold of Tiamat's divine punishment. He found that it could be resisted, and this allowed the black dragon to calm down. No matter what, if Tiamat wanted to exert influence on the prime material plane, she would inevitably be restricted by various kinds of restrictions. Caesar did not believe that Tiamat could create a more powerful divine punishment. As long as the energy level was the same as before, or even slightly higher, he would be able to withstand it and would no longer have to fear Tiamat's divine might. The fusion fire gave Caesar enough energy reserves, and he could afford to waste it. Everything was within Caesar's calculations. If there were no accidents, Tiamat would return empty-handed today. Unfortunately, things often only developed in the worst direction. At this moment, an accident suddenly occurred. The fusion fire that had been stabilizing was extinguished once again. Caesar fell from high place and collapsed to the ground once again. His body, which was already riddled with holes, could no longer support himself. The most exaggerated cracks in history appeared. Although he did not bleed much, the sudden weakness made the black dragon understand his current situation. On the other hand, his mental state was similarly worrisome. His psionic energy had long been squeezed out of him, and after the excitement, his mind was immediately filled with tiredness. The black dragon's mind was in a mess. His first instinct was to rely on his own will to try to restart the furnace again. However, the situation this time was completely different. The fusion fire was not as simple as extinguishing. After a brief sign of instability, it actually began to rapidly decompose and reform into the fission fusion state that Caesar was familiar with. The majestic energy that had been pumped out disappeared without a trace. Damn it! What the hell is going on? The black dragon roared. In fact, he knew very well what the cause of this problem was, but he was unwilling to admit it. The fusion fire was ignited in an almost perfect state, but Caesar's body was the first to give out. If he did not activate the protective mechanism of the force downgrade, this mutated black dragon would probably self-destruct and die before Tiamat's divine punishment descended. His eyelids were getting heavier and heavier. Waves of tiredness and weakness attacked the poor black dragon's brain. Caesar had never liked this feeling. This was a sign that his body was reaching its limit and his brain was out of control. Now that he was in danger, he could not let this happen. The annoying, hazy state lingered in his mind. Caesar walked on the surface of the empty sea. He did not know when he arrived or how he arrived. His body seemed to have turned into a ghost, drifting on the sea filled with hurricanes and reefs. His entire body was filled with a deep sense of powerlessness. The sound of rolling waves was heavy. The turbulent waves rolled up white waves on the ink-black surface of the sea. The scene in his dream was like a rough silhouette painting. Caesar did not even know why he had appeared here. Do you thirst for power? Just as Caesar was puzzled, a strange and familiar murmur suddenly sounded. This voice was not the language of any known species. Even the vocal organs of living creatures could not produce such a strange tone, but it went straight to Caesar's heart, allowing him to understand the meaning of this voice. It's you again? The black dragon's vertical. I turned and looked around with a cold face. Many years ago, he had come into contact with such strange and vicious things. Back then, the indescribable statue found in Roy's house was sent to the Blackwing Kingdom. This voice at first sounded then, but after being interrogated and despised by Caesar, it disappeared silently. It did not affect him at all. After the statue was destroyed, the people of the Blackwing Kingdom who came into contact with that thing quickly went crazy and died. Everything after that was calm and peaceful. Similar strange things did not happen again, and Caesar gradually put it to the back of his mind. He did not expect that it would appear again after so many years. It was like a poisonous stinger buried in the deepest part of his body. When the black dragon reached his limit, it took advantage of the situation and created an illusory dream to hook Caesar into the dream. A bright bolt of lightning flashed past, illuminating his body. At this time, Caesar realized that he was no longer the powerful Black Dragon Lord, but a weak and powerless dragon whelp. Stupid fantasy, childish trick. Glancing at his body, Caesar said with a frown. That voice let out a low moan, as if it was laughing. At this time, a series of gigantic bubbles suddenly appeared in the sea. Each bubble was nearly 100 times bigger than the black dragon in the dream. Then, a hurricane surged, and the boundless sea began to rumble and tremble. It was as if there was a huge monster that wanted to escape from the prison of the sea. Rumble. In the incomparably deep darkness, a giant wave dozens of meters high suddenly roared and slapped at Caesar. However, Caesar did not dodge or even blink his eyes, allowing the monstrous wave to pass through his body. At the end of Caesar's sight, on the sea level, 2 huge full moons rose out of thin air. That was not the moon, but a pair of eyes that could make one go crazy. Through the suffocating darkness, one could see that under those eyes, there seemed to be countless huge tentacles that were wriggling and wriggling constantly. Each of them was larger than the largest ancient dragon. Only half of this huge monster's body could be vaguely seen, and most of the rest was submerged under the dark sea. But just the upper body alone was nearly 1,000 meters tall. The body of the dragon whelp in Caesar's dream was probably not even comparable to the tentacles on those deformed arms. Countless shadows appeared in front of his eyes, and the various illusions rushed left and right in his mind. Such a nightmarish figure could squeeze the mind of any living creature and cause those who dared to look directly at it to fall into a permanent breakdown. Forget it. Caesar curled his lips. Although the senses were no different from the real world, and the suffocating atmosphere that made one despair was just right, he knew very well that all of this was an illusory dream, and there was nothing to be afraid of. Relying on the unknown to create fear might work every time, but Caesar already knew that the other party could not forcefully affect him. If it could, it would have done it a long time ago. Perhaps this indescribable monster before him was indeed its true form. And this monster did indeed have a great power that was difficult to look directly at. But as far as the current situation was concerned, its threat to Caesar was not as high as the evil dragon mother. Looking straight at the figure that was enough to make one go crazy, Caesar said calmly, "Is it enough? When can I go back?" Gulp. The sound did not come from the monster's mouth, but from all directions, transmitted through a method similar to controlling the vibration of the air. The meaning of the whisper was very easy to understand. You now in danger. Desire power, right? It had to be said that it had picked a good time, appearing suddenly when Caesar was on the verge of despair and powerless. It was not easy to reject the temptation of power at this time, even for Caesar. At the end of the day, he was just a dark and selfish guy who pursued profit. The words of the unknown creature made the black dragon who wanted to leave immediately hesitate for a moment. In the end, Caesar thought for a while and asked, "Then what is the price?" "Huh." The nightmarish figure laughed softly. The hurricane came again, and huge waves were swept up into the sky one after another. It seemed to be able to peek into the deepest thoughts of people. The black dragon had been shaken. "Your dream," boom. Before the words could finish, a bolt of lightning came down from the sky like a long dragon, blooming with the most dazzling light, and then disappeared. Before Caesar could say anything to refuse, the whole space of consciousness shook violently, and the real dream shattered like snowflakes. In a trance, he seemed to hear a roar of anger and unwillingness. It seemed like a long time had passed, but it also seemed like only a moment had passed. A strong needle-like, instinctive warning made him suddenly wake up from his dizziness. Before he could think, the feeling of impending doom filled his whole body. The black dragon looked up, and Tiamat's fourth divine punishment came crashing down in an instant. Chapter 3:13. Caesar was pulled back to reality from his dream as Tiamat's divine punishment descended upon him. accompanied by a roar with 5 echoes. The projection of the Dragon Queen's reddish-brown body appeared on the other side of the sky. Black Dragon wanted to escape, but his body could no longer support his agility. Furthermore, the divine punishment had already locked onto him, and he had nowhere to run. The Dragon Queen's roar reverberated in the prime material plane for a long time, and in the next second, the 5-colored halos drowned out the hills. Then came a tsunami that could deafen a true dragon. In the blink of an eye, endless energy surged up, intending to annihilate the rebels who dared to defy the true God. Caesar stood at the center of the gathering of energy. He knew that a great disaster was coming, but he was not nervous or afraid at all. He did not even have time to think about where the monster in his dream came from and why it disappeared. Everything in the past turned into shadows and flew past his mind. In the end, it was fixed on a bright, smiling face. No, giving up resistance and waiting for death was not his story. A variant dragon should not die in such an undignified manner. Caesar clenched his claws, the muscles and scales all over his body expanding as he squeezed out all the remaining potential in his body. He wanted to explode the fission furnace and fight to the death. Tiamat faced him coldly, looking down at Black Dragon from her divine kingdom with a gaze colder than a snowy mountain. Asterisk rumble. Asterisk, it was not Caesar who had exploded the fission furnace, nor was it the descent of Tiamat's divine punishment. Instead, another, even purer energy had joined in, and the light in the sky was shattered by the sudden appearance of the stars. The Platinum Dragon God, the Lord of the Northern Wind, the good Dragon Mother of the Golden Heaven, and Tiamat's eternal enemy, Bahamut had finally arrived, his pale golden body appearing on the other side of the sky. Even though, according to the settings, the Platinum Dragon God was the nemesis of the Penishade dragons, Caesar couldn't help but admire the power and holiness of the Dragon God. Compared to the evil and evil Tiamat, Bahamut's aura was softer, purer, and more solemn. Legend had it that the good Dragon King controlled the wealth of 100 worlds, and he had more than 1 million devout believers in the astral plane, even more than Tiamat. Your plan has failed, Tiamat. The figure occupying the sky said, You pretended to send an army to attack Golden Heaven to stall me. But in reality, you projected Iradia to execute divine punishment and kill this mutated black dragon. Should I praise you for your decisiveness, or should I despise you for lowering yourself and interfering with the operations of the prime material world? Bahamut was a pale golden dragon with a slender and winding body. Its entire body was covered in thick and large scales, which were the complete opposite of the evil dragon mother's fine scales. Even under the faint light, they reflected a beautiful radiance. Its eyes were deep blue, like the midsummer sky. It spoke of Tiamat's schemes, but its eyes were calm and indifferent, giving the illusion that it was looking directly at the stars. During this interval, the dragon god turned his head and nodded slightly at Caesar. With Bahamut paying attention, even if Tiamat chose to execute divine punishment, it would be difficult to hide it from the dragon god's eyes. At most, it would only be able to buy 20 to 30 seconds. The real reason why the Platinum Dragon God was late was because something else had happened in the astral plane. The battlefield of the true gods was not limited to Iradia's dimension. While the evil Dragon Mother was executing divine punishment on Iradia, it had also sent its minions to attract Bahamut's attention. In order to destroy the mutated black dragon, it could be said that it had put in a lot of effort. The Dragon Queen's eyes did not change much. She slowly withdrew her 5-colored divine power and extinguished it in the center of her claws. The situation fell into a temporary stalemate. It's best if you don't attack, Tiamat. The Platinum Dragon God seemed to understand the thoughts of his old enemy. Without waiting for the 5-headed Dragon Queen to speak, he continued, executing divine punishment across endless realms 4 times. I believe that even if you're in the evil scale fortress, your energy consumption will not be small. You don't want to be beaten up by me in front of these children, do you? Tiamat's eyes blazed with anger. She was indeed prepared to kill this rebellious black dragon regardless of anything, even if it would weaken her for a period of time. The evil dragon mother felt a sense of urgency in her heart. This was an excellent opportunity. The power of the mutated black dragon was climbing up like bamboo. If she delayed any longer, she might completely lose this opportunity. For this reason, she had to create another troublesome opponent for herself. However, Bahamut guessed her thoughts correctly. The Dragon Queen's anger subconsciously weakened. This damned old man's appearance here meant that Golden Heaven had already lost the battle. It could be said that she had used all her means. In a situation where Bahamut was determined to protect the Black Dragon, she might not be able to gain any advantage if she continued to fight. If she took another step forward, she might even lose even more miserably. Tiamat lowered her head and did not speak. After weighing the pros and cons, she did not say anything in the end. Her already hazy projection dissipated and she left directly. The Dragon Queen, who liked to gamble, suffered a rare loss. She lost part of her capital. She was so close to success, but she lost her last chance. The consumption of the cross-dimensional divine punishment made the divine power that she had accumulated recently go to waste. In the end, due to the intervention of the Platinum Dragon God, she was unable to kill the mutated Black Dragon. I wonder if the evil Dragon Mother, who retreated in the end, had resentment and unwillingness in her eyes. Caesar did not know, nor did he want to know. His various conditions were reaching their limits. He forced himself to look up at the sky. The mountains that were originally covered by the dark curtain were now covered in a layer of light, revealing the dry, cold, and hard rock layers. The powerful energy and divine power collided during the battle, throwing a large amount of ions and rays into the atmosphere, completely changing the climate of this place. The weather this year was definitely going to be very cold. If the Northlanders were thrown here, they would definitely not admit that this was the Northlands that had been hot since ancient times. Instead, they would feel that the snowy peaks and hills were not hot at all. It was dry and cold. The scorched black rock did its best to capture the remaining heat. The density of the air in each region was completely different. The refraction of light was messy, and even the scenery was distorted. There were some greenish-black embers on the ground beside him. Those were the remnants of the black dragon scales that had been removed from his body and lost their vitality after being roasted by nuclear heat. Caesar reached out and touched the uneven cracks on his chest. If Bahamut had appeared just a little later, he might have really risked his life to go seed. In that case, it seemed that he still had to thank the Platinum Dragon God for saving his life. But no, not at all. Back when Caesar made a contract and promise with the Metal Dragons, all of them emphasized one point. If the Dragon Queen attacks, Bahamut must protect the Black Dragon. Being dragged out on another battlefield could be used as an explanation, but the responsibility still fell on Bahamut without a doubt. Furthermore, no one knew what Bahamut was thinking in the depths of his heart. Did this good Dragon King, with a pure divine personality, rely on Tiamat's divine punishment to test the limits of Caesar Tangerine, the mutated black dragon that did not take sides and did not provide faith, and thus make a comprehensive assessment of him? Chapter 3:14. There was definitely no gratitude, but there was no resentment. Although Caesar was a bad guy, he was mature in terms of wisdom. Black and white was a child's view, and Black Dragon knew very well what kind of attitude he should have toward Bahamut. In fact, this was also good. If the Platinum Dragon God had acted in time and fulfilled his promise perfectly, he would have owed him a favor. Now that the Black Dragon had tricked the Metal Dragons, and Bahamut was a step too late, causing Caesar to almost be beaten to death by the Dragon Queen, they were completely even. Caesar did not know the situation on the other side of the battlefield, but he had completed his mission. Although he did not kill Alex and let the ancestral blue dragon escape, he had at least stalled her for a long time. With Tiamat's divine punishment, the alien black dragon could not even protect himself, and hunting the ancestral blue dragon would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. He believed that the metal dragons saw this and knew it in their hearts. "Hello, Your Majesty, Platinum Dragon God." The brief joy of surviving a disaster surfaced in Caesar's heart, but he quickly suppressed it. He maintained the attitude of a normal non-believer towards a true god, bowing slightly to His Majesty the Dragon God to show his respect. His attitude was neither servile nor overbearing. It was neither warm nor alienating. "Good night, young black dragon." Bahamut lowered his head to look at him. "I can see that you are badly injured." "Not lightly. Sorry, it was my mistake this time." It was hard to imagine that a true god would apologize to an insignificant mortal. The ancestral dragon's pronunciation was clear and perfect, and as he spoke, Bahamut's sky-blue eyes were already focused on Caesar. Soon, pure and flawless divine power appeared out of thin air, healing the alien black dragon's injured body. Bahamut was known throughout the endless realms for his unchanging kindness and compassion. Even though his target was a mutated Pinochet dragon, he was no exception. As a temporary ally, he had sufficient reason to heal the black dragon's injuries. Caesar obediently shut his mouth. The Platinum Dragon God was a true kind god, not some cunning villain in the name of justice. For someone like Caesar, who was evil and easily affected by emotions, Bahamut was a god he did not want to come into contact with. This king of the good dragon had no shortcomings at all, and it was hard to hate him even if one wanted to. Once one got involved with him, it was difficult to get rid of him. If Caesar dealt with this guy too much, he would probably really be affected, and any ambition, desire for power, or even desire for power would be wiped out completely. This was not what Caesar wanted at the moment, so he could only do his best to stay away. He expressed his gratitude to Bahamut for his help, and after a simple conversation, Caesar found an excuse to leave the battlefield. This place had nothing to do with him anymore, and after this battle, the metal dragons had no reason to ask him to help again. The black dragon was in a hurry to return to the northern nest, and there were a lot of doubts in his heart waiting for him to solve. After watching the alien black dragon fly over the hill and disappear, Bahamut lowered his head and used an invisible holy hand to pick up a piece of black residue on the ground. It was the residue of Caesar's scales after being burned by nuclear energy. The residue was only the size of a human's fist, and it contrasted so strongly with the enormous projection of the dragon god, an unusual form of energy. Bahamut's upper eyelids drooped, revealing a thoughtful expression. Different from psionic energy, magic, and divine power, where does it come from? A few golden dragons flew out from the mountains behind them. Your Majesty, killing this black dragon is more in line with our interests. All the mutated dragons that have appeared so far have all broken the rules and caused trouble. This one is the same. The mutated dragons are no less troublesome than the evil dragons. Just now, it was already at the end of its tether. As long as we take action, it has no chance of surviving. No. Bahamut, who was as huge as a mountain, shook his head and looked at the few golden dragon believers. Determine a dragon's faction in advance, label it evil, and then use that as a starting point to dig deeper into its behavior and suspect its motives for everything it does. Things in your eyes will develop as you expect. But your Majesty, it is indeed evil. I have taught you that an intelligent life should be judged based on its historical behavior, and not its race or faction. Bahamut continued, I know that the alien black dragon's behavior is certainly inappropriate, and there is no need to argue about that. But in the faction check, it is neutral. Children, guess why? The few golden dragons looked at each other and shook their heads. The reason for such a situation is because of the country under its rule, as well as the black dragon's attitude towards life. After some time, go to that remote northern country and see for yourself. Perhaps you will understand the reason. This is also the reason why I believe that the mutated black dragon still has the possibility of guiding and teaching. Although the Blackwing King had indeed ruled the northern kingdoms by invading and conquering, and had once caused bloody conflicts and massacred countless lives, after the dust had settled and everything had stabilized, the lives of the ordinary citizens of the northern kingdoms were actually better than before. The laws it implemented at least had the basic regulations to protect human rights. If an ordinary citizen with no power or influence was killed, covered in a cloth bag, and thrown into a river of sewage, at least there would be black shirts responsible for searching for and punishing the murderer, unlike the past when the nobles ruled. Although this did not change the fact that Caesar was evil and that the Black Dragon Lord was guilty of the most heinous crimes, if the dead could not be revived, it was best not to rush to kill this evil dragon. Once the war began, how much blood would be spilled? And when the Black Dragon died, what would happen to the northern kingdoms controlled by the Blackwing clan? If things cannot be changed for the better, then they could only maintain the status quo as much as possible. At the very least, this could ensure that things would not get worse. This was also one of the reasons why Bahamut did not touch the alien Black Dragon and the northern kingdoms. At the very least, the northern kingdoms under the Black Dragon's rule were not flourishing, but there were improvements in various aspects. At the very least, they were not as lifeless and hopeless as before. This world is worse than the worst. At the thought of that, Bahamut could not help but feel a little helpless even as a true god. The good Dragon King certainly had almost infinite power, but it could not set the rules for the entire astral plane. The environment was like that, and most of the main material realms in the astral plane were like that. Caesar lay limp in the dragon lair. While it was true that Bahamut had cast healing spells on him, the damage to his spirit and even his core could not be repaired in a short time. His mind was a mess, and his first instinct was to do his best to maintain the fission furnace. Indeed, due to overclocking and overloading, even the fission reaction had become unstable. Summoning Hog, Caesar spoke weakly with an undulating voice. The war is almost over. I think many dragon lairs would appear near the north, and many true dragons would take root there. Hog bowed in agreement. Then, Your Majesty, what should we do? His eyelids were getting heavier, and Caesar unconsciously moved his claws. Noticing that Luna was sticking to his scales, he was much more relieved. Maintain the previous defensive strategy and keep an eye on them. None of them can be trusted, be it the Penishade dragons or the metal dragons. Chapter 315. The calm pool churned violently, and Caesar suddenly turned over. He had a splitting headache, and the silhouette of the Dragon Queen's last divine punishment kept replaying in his mind. This was the newly built hot spring behind the Blackwing Palace, and now it was the Black Dragon Emperor's recuperation room. The Black Dragon was lying in the pool full of magic power, and the high temperature that could cook living things made him feel warm and comfortable. In addition, there were some female human servants around, and they were pouring all kinds of spices into the pool according to the prescribed time. Seeing the familiar scene, Caesar relaxed and found that his limbs were still weak, so he simply sank back into the pool to rest. The fragmented dream replayed in his mind for a long time, and the divine punishment of the Dragon Queen was still fresh in his memory. It was still risky. If Bahamut had not fulfilled his promise, or even been a step late, Caesar himself did not know what would have happened after the furnace exploded. Anyway, no matter what, there was no way to cross the plane to hurt the evil Dragon Mother, and he would definitely have died. Even if he was lucky enough to survive, his power level would plummet, and he would be at the mercy of others. So before he had the ability to control the situation, it was best to keep a respectful distance from these gods. This time, if he hadn't promised the metal dragons that he would fight with Alex and exhaust his strength in advance, Tiamat wouldn't have found the opportunity to punish him. At that time, he had practically handed his life over to Bahamut, and his life and death were in the hands of the Platinum Dragon God. Of course, the original source of all this was that Caesar had been entangled with the metal dragons in order to fight against Tiamat's believers. Then he had betrayed the alliance and secretly set the metal dragons up. Greed and selfishness were original sins, and so was self-righteousness. Although the bitter fruit was late, it was never absent. This was wrong, and there was nothing to wash away. Caesar himself did not mean to shamelessly find an excuse to deny it, but since Tiamat had left, this matter had come to an end for the time being. If there was any follow-up, he would talk about it in the future. Now he was mainly thinking about his own affairs. Although the fission furnace had stabilized, Caesar's reckless actions in the battle still had a big impact on him. The energy supplied by the fission furnace was now one level lower than before, and his combat power index in the assessment device had dropped. But the good thing was that Caesar had used this opportunity to verify the feasibility of igniting fusion fire. But at this stage, he could not do it again. No matter what, he had to wait until his body and the furnace recovered before he could do it slowly. On the other hand, he was still thinking about the matter of the monster in the dream. From what he knew so far, although it was not as effective as a true god in the main material world, Caesar's subconscious impression that it was probably more powerful than an ordinary true god. A long time ago, that existence had appeared once, but at that time, Caesar was in the Buddhist stage of having just taken his revenge. His pursuit of power was not strong, and that guy did not have a substantial impact on the Black Dragon. But after such a long time, when a mutated Black Dragon was in danger, it actually appeared once more. This was definitely not a coincidence. Even if it wasn't paying attention at all times, at the very least, that existence still paid a certain amount of attention to Caesar, bewitching and luring him into taking the bait when he was in a desperate situation. The question was, what did it want? When Caesar asked what price he had to pay, the answer was, your dream. However, as soon as the words fell, lightning flashed across the sky, and the dream shattered. Caesar even felt that before the monster at the bottom of the sea could finish speaking, his consciousness was forcibly pulled back to reality. For this, he even heard the angry roar of the existence. Although he did not know what the reason for the collapse of the dream was, it was probably not because of Tiamat's divine punishment. That guy, Caesar temporarily called it the tentacle monster, should be able to observe the situation he was in at that time through some means. Otherwise, it would not have waited for the opportunity to make a move at the critical moment and propose to give power in exchange. This meant that while the tentacle monster had the ability to drag Caesar's consciousness into the illusion, it could control the passage of time in the dream. In other words, when Caesar was in the dream, the time in the outside world was in a relatively stagnant state. In this way, Tiamat's divine punishment could not even touch Caesar's body before he left the dream and could not pose a substantial threat to him. Without a doubt, the Black Dragon, who was in a desperate situation, hesitated for a moment. It could be said that from the tentacle monster's point of view, it was about to succeed. Then, the dream collapsed, and its actions became meaningless. It could not be that the tentacle monster's power was not enough to support the dream to continue, right? From the information that Caesar currently understood, the monster was not stupid to this extent. Then, what was the reason for the collapse of a dream, and why it let out such a memorable roar of indignation? Black Dragon, who had his head submerged in the hot spring, gently shook his head and thought hard. He subconsciously felt that this question was more important and could have a huge impact on his future development, but he could not figure it out for a while. Wait, your dream? Black Dream? Caesar was a little surprised, and his face immediately became serious. The other party actually knew of the existence of the Black Dream, and seemed to have come for the Black Dream. That was the only explanation. He did not have anything on him that could attract the tentacle monster's interest. Black Dragon did not even have a single magical instrument on him at that time, and when the tentacle monster mentioned this matter, the dream immediately shattered. Was it affected by the Black Dream? Caesar instantly thought of many things. When he was still weak, he did not go crazy when he saw that vicious and strange little statue. He did not even show the slightest fear when he talked to that monster. It was probably not because his soul and body were different from ordinary people, but because the Black Dream helped him block some things that could affect his mind, including this time. If that was the case, that guy was probably stronger than a normal true god. At least back then, although the mother of evil dragons, Tiamat, could see through the truth of Caesar's otherworldly soul at a glance, she did not find out that there was something else in his head. However, this secret, the tentacle monster that pretended to be mysterious, actually knew about it, and seemed to be full of interest. Caesar could not help but feel a trace of vigilance. although recently, he had gradually collected the growth plan of psionic power and different ways to obtain power, which allowed Caesar to get rid of his dependence on the Black Dream to a certain extent. The Black Dream was still the root of his life. Regarding the existence of a dark space, Caesar had never mentioned it to Luna. The Black Dragon subconsciously tightened his claws. The Black Dream that he was born with did not seem to appear out of thin air arranged by the heavens, but had a certain relationship with that monster. He had to be more careful, right? Speaking of the Black Dream, he really had to take a look. The dark space had not taken the initiative to pull him in for a long time, and he did not know if a new trophy had appeared in it. Chapter 3:16. On both sides of the Black Dream was still an endless darkness, but from time to time, there would be various unknown creatures cheering, howling, and even roaring. When they first appeared, even Caesar was shocked, and now he was also confused. Walking along the path to the end, the edge of the giant display case that was emitting light expanded by several times, and he could vaguely see a garden-like square. When Caesar came closer and saw the sudden appearance of the dark space, his pupils could not help but shrink. In the middle of the square, there was an obsidian statue that was close to 5 meters tall. It was a black dragon covered in armor-like scales, with strong muscles and sharp claws and teeth. It was simply a miniature version of Caesar, and even some of the details were the same. Its eyes were dyed red by blood jade, and there were fine cracks on its chest. The black dragon statue bared its teeth, revealing a ferocious look. It was sitting on the throne, looking down at its feet with a serious face. Below the mini statue in Caesar's eyes, there was a miniature city that was exactly the same as the countries in the north. There were still unclear boundaries between the countries that had not completely merged. The country and the statue were surrounded by yellow sand, and in the middle of the sand that acted as the continent, there were many empty spaces that were reserved. Those were unknown areas that Caesar had not explored and understood. Caesar took in all of this and pondered for a while without saying anything. Then he turned to the huge, glorious trophy next to the display case. King of Black Wings, your performance in the battle against the 5-colored evil dragon was extremely outstanding, and since then, your name has been recorded in the history books. The name Caesar Tangerine has been widely spread once again. From now on, after some people have heard of your deeds, they will not be able to sleep or eat in peace. Fame is sometimes also power. Reward, radiation. This was a pure gold reward, and Caesar did not need to think to know where this achievement came from. First, he beat up the ancestral blue dragon Alex, and then endured 3 rounds of Tiamat's divine punishment. Even if the evil dragon mother and the evil dragons did not mention it, this matter could not be hidden. Recently, it had spread widely in Iradia, and even had the tendency to spread to other regions in the astral plane. However, what puzzled Caesar was that the radiation ability was originally a subsidiary function of the fission furnace, but he did not have a way to control it at the moment. Black Dream simply helped him open up a channel to control this ability, and it could release the radiation in his body. Logically speaking, this level should not be able to reach the level of pure gold, but black jade. Of course, he would only know how effective this reward was after he returned to reality to experiment. When he finished reading the entire contents of the trophy, the words on the base were easily erased by some mysterious force, as if they were chalk. Caesar gently touched the trophy, and the towering trophy turned into fine light spots, as usual, and merged into his body. Caesar turned to look at the second trophy, the Black Jade Trophy. Psionic Apostle, congratulations. You have found an additional way to obtain power and have crossed the threshold of psionic power. After this, your hearing, sight, smell, touch, and taste have been greatly improved, and from now on, you will have the perception ability of a true god. The life of a mutated dragon is 1 in a million, and its unique characteristic makes your every move attract attention. Be careful of those eyes. Reward, hunting intuition. Caesar frowned slightly, not because of the reward without any description. Black Dream had always been like this, and he was already used to it. What made Caesar uneasy was that the label on the trophy seemed to have a deeper meaning. The unique characteristic at the end of the description, was it referring to his identity as a mutated dragon, or Black Dream himself? Be careful of those eyes. Was it referring to the tentacle monster? Although the Black Dragon had doubts, he did not ask for the method. The mysterious dark space seemed to be just a high-level program that did not have self-consciousness, and Caesar could passively adapt to it. Other than that, Caesar glanced at the newly appeared miniature city and did not notice anything unusual. This should be a new function of the dark space, used to show his current situation. Other than that, there was nothing special. Seeing that he had finished understanding and obtaining what he needed, Caesar stayed alone in the dark space for a while, and then he wanted to leave. When he thought about it, his consciousness and senses suddenly became dislocated, and he returned to reality in the blink of an eye. As far as his eyes could see, all living things that moved in slow motion like bullet time quickly returned to normal. However, the Black Dragon did not immediately climb out of the hot spring to test his rebirth ability. Instead, he sank deeper and began to sleep again. After all, Caesar's current state was still not good. His rebirth ability had not repaired his overdrawn body's functions. Now, the Black Dragon's muscles were still sore, and the furnace had been in an inefficient state. It was better to avoid going out as much as possible during this period. Tiamat was not someone who gave up easily. Only God knew if she would find a chance to attack again. A series of bubbles rose to the surface of the lake, and the Black Dragon sank to the bottom of the hot spring. Even the jagged thorns on his back sank into the water and disappeared. Caesar fell into a short sleep, and during this time, his body unexpectedly discharged a lot of heat. Although the fission furnace was constantly being adjusted and repaired under the influence of Caesar's subjective will, it could not be restored to its best state. He could only do his best to prevent it from performing worse. At the same time, without Caesar's deliberate influence, his body also grew in a small range due to its adaptive function. There was a certain degree of adjustment to adapt to the changes that might occur in the future. Blazing heat constantly radiated from the sleeping Black Dragon's body. At the highest temperature, it even caused the entire hot spring to boil, which was very shocking. While Caesar was recovering, time continued to pass. The battle between the chromatic dragons and the metallic dragons was about to come to an end, but the war between them was like any other war in the past millions of years. In the end, there was no clear victor, and both sides were treated with heavy injuries. Caesar had also swallowed the consequences of this war, but because of his decision, the Blackwing Empire was able to stay out of the War of the Dragons, leaving behind an extremely large portion of their military reserves. The Blackwing clan under his command had almost been completely preserved in the truest sense. On the other hand, this battle had also indirectly promoted the integration of the various countries in the Northern Lands. After the powerful Black Dragon had completed the unification of the various countries, the Blackwing's lair, which had the entire Northern Lands as its territory, could finally be marked as a country on the map of the continent of Aladia. Although the newly born Blackwing Empire was pitifully small in both size and population, it was believed that after a long period of time, these difficulties would gradually improve. Chapter 317. During this period of time, Caesar always looked like he could not wake up. His condition was very bad, but it did not affect his control over the empire. With the end of the surrounding wars, the Emperor of the Black Dragon tried to loosen the control over the territories under his rule. He removed the blockade on the borders of the former Rhine region and no longer restricted the entry and exit of people. In other words, the people living in this region could now freely enter and exit the empire's territory. A country could not maintain a high pressure forever, and it was even more so for a new empire. From a general point of view, the policies would definitely be loosened gradually. Caesar needed this country to maintain its vitality and not be like a pool of stagnant water. After nearly 10 years of integration and nurturing, the Black Dragon Emperor felt that the time had come to loosen the control. Only loosening the control of the Rhine region was in fact a test. Caesar needed to receive feedback and observe the reactions of the people under his rule before considering the implementation of the next strategy. If a large number of Northland residents were to escape, it would mean that the Black Dragon Emperor had made a mistake in his assessment, and he would immediately choose to stop. If the results were ideal, Caesar would continue to consider loosening his control over the various regions. The northern countries should now be called the Blackwing Empire. Here, the old nobles were suppressed to the greatest extent. The new Blackwing nobles also had to be strictly supervised by the royal court. At the same time, the Black Dragon Code also had a bill to protect basic human rights. The oppression of the ordinary people and the taxes were reduced by more than one level. It could be said that this new country did not have the bad habits that the other city-states in Iradia were used to. At least, that was the case for now. The various guarantees and advantages were the fundamental reason why the royal court was confident that there would not be a population exodus, even if they were to loosen their control. What happened in the following period of time also confirmed the Black Dragon ruler's guess. Apart from a small number of people who went out for adventures and trade, the scene of people escaping the Black Dragon's claws on a large scale did not happen. Soon, as the Blackwing Empire was fully on the right track, the country that was full of vitality could not wait to extend its tentacles. With Caesar's permission, Hogg began to send troops to the Tahala Desert, bringing the desert that had been cleared out into the empire's territory. At the same time, for the sake of development, he opened up more than one trade route in the desert and built relay stations along the way. Since then, this mixed empire that was like an alien had opened a new chapter of trade with the other countries and cities in Iradia. Meanwhile, in the west, the Wyverns and the Shadow Manticore had chased away the aboriginals of the Narrow Sea Islands. Ships with black sails had appeared on the Narrow Sea Islands. In order to solve the shortage of minerals and precious metals in the northern lands, the mercenaries hired by the Empire had begun a new adventure. They attempted to sail westward in an attempt to open up more and more islands. But on the other hand, the Empire that had just been established did not have the ability to carry out ocean voyages. Therefore, Caesar did not pay much attention to this at the moment. He only set up his forces along the coast. If he really wanted to start the era of great voyages, he would still need a certain amount of technological reserves. What he did not expect was that after the expulsion of the natives, the Empire's territorial waters soon welcomed new visitors. Worshippers of the goddess of Wajin appeared on the surface of the sea, trying to do business with the Blackwing Empire. These merchants who smelled the scent of the goddess of Wajin knew that this was a country ruled by a black dragon. Their god had already told them. However, even if they were afraid, the power of money and wealth was not far away. For money, these people even dared to make deals with the demons and devils of the bottomless abyss and the Helibodor. In this way, a mere black dragon was really nothing. After Caesar, who had been lying lazily, learned of this matter, he finally became interested and let Hogg warmly receive these foreign visitors. After doing enough homework on hundreds of famous true gods, the goddess of wealth, Wajin, became one of the few gods that Kay was willing to deal with. She was not an original god like the nine-faced dragon god or the black-blooded beast, but a god that was born with the emergence of civilization. Wajin was a god of absolute neutrality. Her priesthood was trade and money. Such a god would not pose a substantial threat to Caesar regardless of her likes or dislikes. Moreover, it was a good choice to have a good relationship with Wajin and her followers for the development of the North at this stage. Although this goddess was often ridiculed as a whore who could be slept with money. This time, the caravan of Wajin's followers did not bring many things. Basically, there were some alchemy potions and catalysts, as well as various books and magical items. For some poor and remote places, these things were always very popular. The position of the new Blackwing Empire in the eyes of the people on the continent was self-evident. After that, the royal court chose to eat a small loss and happily accepted the goods. They did not let the merchants who came from afar return disappointed. Then, the royal court began to negotiate with Wajin's followers about cooperation and trade. These merchants were indeed useful. Not only did they need to import, but the empire also needed to carry out export trade. The assembly line factory, which covered an extremely large area, was the second set of giant buildings built in the north under the rule of the Black Dragon, after the royal court. Now, all of them had been completed and put into production. The royal court excavated and imported iron ore and transferred it to the Goblin Workshop for smelting. Then, the assembly line factory carried out batch production. Under the leadership of the newly established Ministry of Commerce, the Northlands used the mass-produced military goods to do business with the other cities in Aladia. The Empire exported swords, weapons, armor, crossbows, and arrows, as well as some highly processed enchanted products. To tell the truth, when Wajin saw tens of thousands of military goods, she had already fallen in love with this black dragon. No matter which material plane in the astral world, war was the eternal theme, and in a material plane with low productivity like Iradia, there was absolutely no need to worry about selling these military consumables. Although she did not know what kind of water went into the head of Caesar Tangerine as the ruler to sell these precious goods, there was no doubt that this would bring her excessive trade volume and profits. She had no reason not to love this big black dragon. In terms of imports, in addition to the previously mentioned minerals, the royal court relied on caravans to import a large number of alfalfa seed from the western marshland kingdom and began to plant them on a large scale. The alfalfa was very famous in Iradia. In the dwarf kingdom, it was used to raise cattle, sheep, pigs, and some birds. In the north, it had become a substitute for the giant creatures, such as the horsegate lizard, steel ox, and dragonhorn goat. It was worth mentioning that the policy of the Black Dragon Emperor regarding logistics was now beginning to bear fruit. The banks of the Rapids River and the newly opened Rhine River were green wheat fields. Now, the north not only produced a large amount of wheat and flour, but also potatoes, oats, and barley. Due to the uniqueness of the lack of resources in the north, at this stage, most of the food output was used for self-sufficiency. Most of it was digested by the north. Wheat, flour, and especially meat were very scarce in the north. Although there was a great improvement now, the situation was still not optimistic. Moreover, the north still had to raise a terrifying monster, the king of the Black Wings, Caesar Tangerine. The Black Dragon's appetite was very terrifying. This guy had not reached the point where he could survive just by absorbing the supernatural elements in this world. The ancient dragons were probably like this. It was estimated that it was not possible for him to reach this step with his attribute of being blind to the law from the beginning to the end. With a huge body that was 35 meters long, the daily consumption was not a small amount. Therefore, looking at the situation, in terms of logistics, the Blackwing Royal Court had to further expand their production. If they wanted to have the ability to export, they would have to wait for a long time. The minor details came one after another. Caesar dealt with them patiently for a while, but soon he could not take it anymore. He pushed all the matters to the decision-makers of the royal court, such as Hagengal, while he returned to the Hot Spring Lake Sanatorium, preparing for a deeper level of recuperation. The reason for his decision was that the surface temperature of the Black Dragon's body was completely chaotic. It was at least 10 degrees Celsius higher than usual. It looked like he had a fever and was sick. However, dragons seemed to be naturally immune to diseases, and Iradia did not have the concept of disease. Apart from that, there were other abnormalities in his body. Caesar's appetite was much larger than usual. He now had to eat at least 12 specially provided base Mulhorn cattle every day to barely not feel hungry. The bigger problem was that he had begun to devour metal again. After the energy core absorbed Mailer's divine fragment and was upgraded to a fission furnace, Caesar had already abandoned his need for metal minerals and no longer needed to rely on them to replenish his energy. However, during this period, the painful hunger had resurfaced, and it was more intense than before. Chapter 3:18. After a long period of eating, sleeping, and eating, Caesar was finally free from the troubles caused by his erratic hunger. In truth, this also meant that his body's demand for a certain element had reached saturation. Because of this, Caesar could finally enter a relatively stable and continuous period of deep sleep. Due to the strong energy collision, the turbulence of the rays, and the loss of the atmosphere, the climate of the northern lands was constantly changing. The butterfly effect caused a chain reaction that even caused the movement of the Earth's crust to intensify. Under the pressure of the underground plates, the broken mountain range that had been cut in half by Tiamat's divine punishment began to rise continuously. Even the small hills and plains around it were being lifted up continuously. These mountain peaks were coincidentally located at the border of the Blackwing Empire. Accompanying their rapid formation was a high-frequency earthquake that affected the entire northern lands. What was even more exaggerated was that due to the abnormal changes in the Earth's crust, huge cracks were constantly appearing in this region, making the path to the Blackwing Empire even more dangerous and difficult to cross. From a certain perspective, this was also a natural barrier. As the temperature continued to drop, the northern lands gradually changed into a warm and humid rainforest climate. The number of streams and lakes in the entire northern region increased by quite a bit. However, the vegetation did not increase at this stage. Looking down from above, the entire northern lands were still covered by yellow sand and plains. However, if the climate and rainfall could be maintained after the change, there was no doubt that large patches of vegetation would appear after a long period of time. The entire northern lands would become a lush rainforest. Of course, the changes in the terrain and climate were noticed by the empire. However, before the news reached the imperial court, the half-asleep Caesar had already known about it. Using this opportunity, he finally understood the function of the miniature city of Black Dream. It was essentially a panoramic view from above, allowing him to monitor the changes in the Blackwing Empire and its surroundings in real time. The Black Dragon's body now seemed to be one size larger than before. The surface of his body temperature continued to rise, and his scales revealed a dark red luster under the water, as if they were red-hot molten metal. In his sleep, the ends of his scales discharged some organic and inorganic substances that had accumulated in his body due to the absorption of minerals. These impurities did not spread outwards, but instead mixed with the lake water. Due to the weak energy around Caesar, they covered and flowed over his body as if ignoring gravity. Inside Caesar's body, the changes were still ongoing. The glands and sacs that secreted the exhalation substance had begun to change. They had become larger and more numerous. Some brand new honeycomb-shaped crystalline organs had also appeared in his body, especially the parts near his throat, which were rapidly developing. At the same time, his body stealthily avoided Caesar's attention, stealthily stealing the energy of the fission furnace. With this, he began to adjust his body in almost all aspects. This was also one of the reasons why Caesar had never been able to restore his energy core to its optimal state. Near the blood vessels in his body, new tubular organs began to proliferate. These organs were all hollow after they were formed, and no blood flowed through them. The ends of these tubes were connected to the fission furnace, but they did not absorb the energy it produced. It was as if they had been prepared in advance for other things. The Black Dragon's breath had not been strengthened much in his sleep because the method of production was still chemical synthesis. Its lethality and storage capacity were not much different from before. However, due to the proliferation and mutation of his body tissues, Caesar's air intake compression ratio had increased slightly, so his breath could reach farther, wider, and more powerful. That was all. As for Caesar's fission breath, because it was directly supplied by the furnace, its power did not increase when the furnace was damaged. Instead, it decreased by more than one energy level. The new honeycomb-shaped crystalline organs in his throat were not prepared for the fission breath. They were waiting for something new. The Black Dragon's body began to glow. This glow was accompanied by high temperature and radiation, but it was well suppressed. The guy's internal organs were constantly damaged and corroded by the radiation he subconsciously released, and then they were constantly repaired and regenerated, growing into a stronger, more resilient, and more resistant appearance. Apart from that, there were also some unusual small pieces of flesh that were constantly proliferating. At first, they only took root and sprouted in some empty places in Caesar's body, but later they had the tendency to spread to the internal organs. Soon, they eroded Caesar's internal organs and fused with them. After that, the black dragon's internal organs no longer festered under the high temperature and radiation. Instead, they seem to have been assimilated, and they began to emit heat and radiation. It had to be said that the adaptive adjustment system carried by the autonomous control unit was still an important ability for Caesar. It was also the foundation of the black dragon's ability to accommodate many abnormal abilities. In the end, Caesar's muscles and scales gained a new special ability. They blocked out the radiation and could be released at any time under Caesar's subjective control. With the further adjustment of his body, Caesar gradually felt better. He could begin to enter a deeper sleep. The surface area of the hot spring lake began to expand under the influence of the energy and continued to emit high temperatures. After discovering this, Leon immediately led the spellcasters to set up a heat-insulating spell around the lake. However, they still could not completely maintain the original environment. No one knew what had happened to the Black Dragon Emperor, but in the following period of time, the hot spring lake had already turned into boiling magma in the eyes of mortals. This place began to be filled with the smell of sulfur and gradually emitted a suffocating poisonous gas. Occasionally, electric arcs would jump on the surface of the lake, making this place even more terrifying. In the second month of the Black Dragon Emperor's slumber, the originally pleasant hot spring lake was no longer suitable for ordinary creatures to live in. The guards and servants who were originally in charge of watching over the place had no choice but to withdraw from this place. Even Luna didn't receive any preferential treatment. She had no choice but to angrily pout and find a safer place to build a small house. However, this time, Caesar should have slept for too long. He knew this, and so did Luna. The Black Dragon's slumber cycle was different from other true dragons, which often lasted for more than 10 years. Judging from the previous situation, 3 years was a relatively long time for him to sleep. Caesar had not reached the next age yet, but his body had a series of adaptations. This time, it should only take 3 months to half a year for him to fully awaken. During the Black Dragon Emperor's slumber, the Empire still maintained a stable operation. The messy news about Iradia was also handed over to Hogg. However, there was nothing new under the sun, so after Caesar fell asleep, there was no great turmoil in Iradia. The only thing that was worth reporting to Hogg was that the black-blooded beast Mailer had completely abandoned Iradia, and that the believers of the god of hunting were gradually disappearing. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.